Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host and constant reader, Scott Daly.
This is Matt Freeman speaking. I do this podcast of my own free will.
I mean, like, who said you weren't doing it of your own free will?
I just want to make sure everybody knows, okay? I did this of my own free will, okay?
Okay. I got it. Okay. Jeez. Calm down, Matt. Everyone knows that you totally did it because I made you. This week on the show, we reached the end of Book 2 of The Stand. We're discussing chapters 57 through 60. This week, Harold and Nadine execute their plan with explosive results, and Mother Abigail returns to send our characters on their final quest. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
Well, this was definitely something that we have been building up to for, well, the whole book in a sense,
ever,
but
yeah.
at least several weeks in terms of this exact plot movement. Man, there's going to be so I feel like there have been several times in recent weeks where we said like, but we don't really quite know where we're going with this, and a lot of stuff is definitely sort of, if not totally resolved, then definitely set in a firm direction in terms of where we're headed with it or what we're doing with it. So
yeah, the shape of the last act and arc of the book is now clear to us. I think relatively clear to us. Yes,
and where we're going with the characters and the themes, I think, are a bit clearer. And so that's going to be interesting to talk about. Yeah,
absolutely. I can't wait. This has been the part of the book I've been, both dreading as a person in love with these characters and also looking forward to as a person that likes to talk about this book with you for a long time. So I'm glad it's finally here.
Awesome.
A couple things before we get started, though. The first is, last week we talked about Harold writing into Red Book magazine. I mean, I think this shows my ignorance of both romantic magazines and also of pornography. I said on that episode, Matt, that Red Book was a porno mag. It's not. It was just a woman's romance magazine that Harold it belonged to his mother, probably, and he read it and then was so mad at the quality of the writing on his mother's romance mag that he wrote them to tell them to get better at writing. So it wasn't porn he was complaining about. I think the reality makes it almost worse, right?
Yeah, well, it's definitely kind of funnier actually that he's writing into like a bodice ripper romance. Mm-hmm. Okay, like here's the thing is, I think the reason why why neither you or me was like, yes, Red Book, is because like I've never heard of Red Book. The idea of a romance magazine is kind of, I'm like, what? Like I know what a romance novel is. I assume a romance magazine is sort of like a mix between Vogue and the literary magazine containing short stories, perhaps syndicated ones. I actually don't even know what the word romance mag refers to.
Well, I mean, it's really, honestly, it was just a woman's magazine. Oh, okay. I mean, that had, I think, romance story, like a romance story section in it. I was looking this up while you were talking, and it seems like this thing was out for a long time. This was 1903. This magazine started. Its final print issue went out in 2019. So they really hung in there.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. So really we have no excuse.
Yeah. So, I mean, he grabs his mother's woman's magazine. He reads the romance stories in it, probably because he's a little hornball and he's trying to find examples of anything to do with sex anywhere. And he's like, oh, the writing in these magazines is so pedestrian that we should euthanize those people.
Yeah, we should euthanize, or what was it? Forced sterilization. What was it?
Sterilization.
Yeah. Basically just insane shit coming out of Harold.
I'm gonna I said last week that I didn't want to say that Harold hates women because that seems like a too broad of a statement, but maybe Harold just kind of hates women. Harold's rejection from women or self-imposed rejection from women has just manifested to full-on hatred of women now. Maybe that's a fair thing to say.
I barely feel like pushing back on that, although I'll just say that I think maybe where we landed last week is like Harold just hates himself, and thus he hates everyone.
Certainly,
and so women get caught in the backblast of that. But I think fundamentally it's all about self-hatred, and that's kind of his defining character trait.
I think you're right there. The only other announcement we had is we just wanted to let y'all know about our book club. If you have not participated in the book club in the past, please do. It is basically, what you would think a book club is, except for online. We meet up on our YouTube channel once a month and just chat about a book that is chosen by our patrons. Last month, we just had it last Friday, and it was on, oh my God, what is the name of that book? Why can't I remember? It's the First Law series by Joe Abercrombie. The Blade Itself. Thank you. We read the first book of the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, The Blade Itself. And this month, this October, we are going to be finally reading Watership Down. So I know that's a book that's referenced many, many times in Stephen King. This very episode, we're going to get another Watership Down reference. So we're finally going to read that book, and we hope you guys will join us. We will be doing that on all the way at the end of the month. It'll be the 28th of October, Friday night at 9:30 Central. We're telling you this early so you have plenty of time to go out and get the book and do the reading, and then hang out with us on YouTube for a couple hours. We will, of course, remind you the episode before that book club goes live as well, but just wanted to let you know early here.
Yeah, I look forward to that. It's going to be a lot to dig into. We'll probably mention Stephen King about 500 times during that episode. So
I think that's probably an understatement, but yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, you might as well consider it an episode of Kingslingers, really.
Yeah. All right, Matt, before we begin with the chapters themselves this week, we do have a bit of a confession to make to our audience.
A confession that the audience, if they've been paying attention, should already know. But go on, Scott.
We have been lying to you, audience. We've been lying to you for months. Matt has known something about this book from the very beginning, and we've intentionally not told you what Matt knew. Matt, what is it that you knew about this book?
So I read the Stephen King book On Writing years and years ago, before this project was even a twinkling in the eye. And then I read On Writing again more recently because we were doing this project.
I think it was right after we finished the Dark Tower series, right?
Yeah. And so long story short, in On Writing, Stephen King makes the interesting choice of spoiling the major plot event in The Stand by way of making a point about the difficulties of storytelling and how you have to kind of solve story problems by pulling something out of your ass from time to time.
Yeah, I think he's talking about like that he's never had full-on writer's block, but the closest he got to was in The Stand, where he got all these people to Boulder and he just didn't know what to do with them next, and he almost put the book away forever because he just couldn't figure out what to do next.
Right. So what I knew, and here we must bless my terrible memory, which has become a fixture of these podcasts, actually. All I remembered was that some character detonates a bomb and it kills several of the important characters. So I didn't remember who planted the bomb, and I didn't remember who died, but I remember there was a bomb, and I remember that the bomb went off. As things started to culminate in this book, I started to be like, yeah, it's probably going to be Harold, right? And of course, Scott never confirmed anything, but he did kind of know that I had an inkling. So anyway, what's funny is that it's, as far as spoilers go, like the way Stephen King is, like he kind of told us there was going to be a bomb, and he told us a bunch of people were going to die, and like he foreshadows the shit out of everything all the time. So I never really felt super spoiled, honestly. We're just coming clean with y'all,
Right.
You know?
I mean, I think the reason we're doing that, like I was the one. I think you came to me and were like, should I just say that I know that this is going to happen eventually? And I kind of made the decision to say no, almost entirely for the reason that I know for a fact we do have some first-time stand readers in the audience, and I didn't want to take away their choice whether to be fully spoiled on this or not, without any warning. So we just kind of elected to say, no, we're just going to keep it a secret, that you knew about this. We're just going to not mention it directly. Although you're right. If a listener was listening closely and knew that you had read On Writing very recently, they would know that you knew all about this. And I obviously, like, what not saying this does is it kind of forces your gut reaction to a lot of the things that have been happening over the past week to not be 100% pure, right? Like there were things that you probably were thinking as you were reading these sections that you couldn't say because of what you knew. And so I guess like, let's just take this opportunity here at the beginning of the show to just like talk about the context of the last few weeks. And I mean, even prior to that, with what you knew about the explosion. I mean, how much was that on your mind as the events of everything happening in the Boulder Free Zone started to escalate?
Funnily enough, the ultimate spoiler for me wasn't like, oh, there's going to be a bomb, people are going to die. It was actually the idea that the story will eventually get to a point where all of our good guy characters will be congregated in one place, having some kind of town hall meeting like interaction, and then there will be a bomb. And so, funnily enough, it's funny to me, the fact that there was a bomb, I felt was like super well foreshadowed. It was sort of the thrust of the story where it's like, well, okay, I know at some point everybody's going to be together and they're going to be having a meeting, which seems like much less of a spoiler, and I guess it is less of a spoiler. But as everyone congregated on Boulder, I was like, yeah, that's what I knew that was going to happen, basically.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
All things considered, these are not what I would consider to be major spoilers, and I don't think that I had to like hold myself back from saying anything in particular. Like the only thing maybe I explicitly had to hold myself back from saying is like, yeah, so it's going to be Harold who does the bombing, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I think if you go back and listen, there's moments where like I think both of us are trying to hold our breath at the idea of like, and yep, something's coming, and like we both clearly know what that thing coming. I mean, obviously everyone knows that I do, but the one thing they didn't know is that you did. But I mean, I think you're right that like obviously the week prior we got told there's a bomb. And the way King writes, like he's not holding this back, but I'm glad we just chose to do it this way. I will say that just for the audience, one of the things that doing it this way did was I couldn't have fun with you last week and on the show and be like, well, who's going to live? Who's going to die? But that's okay, listeners, because I did that anyway. I asked you in our chat last week, Matt, next week the explosion's going to happen. You know this is coming. Who is going to make it? What is the results going to be? And you, before reading it, you made a series of guesses, and I think we'll talk about those here at the beginning of the show before we get into everything, because I think they're pretty delightful, actually.
Yeah. Do you want to go through them, or should I?
Yeah, you go through them.
Yeah. So I threw as much out there as I could. So I said, in descending order of certainty, meaning the first thing I'm going to say here is the thing I was most certain of.
Right.
And the last thing is the least certain. So first I said Larry and Nick both survive. Oops. Well, 50-50. I said Stu dies.
Yeah.
I should have phrased this next one differently because it's stupid. What I said was 100% of our named side characters like Ralph and Glenn die.
This is middle of the pack as far as certainty, and you use the phrase 100% of our named characters.
Well, that was just stupid wording. What I meant was all of these side characters we've been introduced to are basically dead, which some of our side characters did die, of course, but just not the two that I happened to name. So that was I'll count that as a pretty low score there.
Okay.
Next one, Franny loses the baby.
Wrong.
Although you can't exactly blame me for going for that one.
No, I think that was pretty heavily foreshadowed. Like, if you know there's an explosion happening, and then the week prior to the explosion, the book is like, Franny's really worried about her baby.
Right.
I think that's a completely logical leap to have, and it just happened to be wrong.
And then my final one was Nadine escapes, but Harold doesn't.
Which also wrong.
Yeah, my rationale here was like, Nadine definitely has to get to Vegas so that whatever horrible thing we have in store for her can happen. But Harold, like, now that he's done this, the only thing left to happen to him is like to get his just desserts, basically, or to escape. And live a life of luxury. No, like there's no way he gets out of this whole situation, right? So I was just figuring like, Stu's going to catch him and kill him or something. That didn't. I mean, that could still actually sort of happen, right?
Sure.
Just later. So I didn't do too well in my predictions. But I think I can explain why. My mistake was that in my mind, I thought the bomb was going to hit one of their like full town hall meetings, like with like 1,000 people packed into a building together. I thought like 300 people were going to die, like I thought it was going to be like a massive, terrorist event style thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that we were going to lose like half of the characters. But no, it's like, no, we lost 7 people and like only one of them was really like a critical central character. And the reason I thought all this is that in context of King's anecdote from On Writing, he's telling a story about how he didn't know how to get out of the corner he'd painted himself into. And so he used a bomb to just kind of snip all of the loose threads that he didn't know how to deal with. And so my assumption from the context of that was like, well, then there must have been a lot of threads that needed snipping,
mm-hmm.
not just like a couple of threads. And thus, you got to kill a lot of characters. Like, no, he killed like one that we actually care about. So I was surprised at how few people died actually.
Well, fuck Sue, huh? It's only one that we care about. Screw you, Sue.
She's not a point of view character. She doesn't matter.
No, I understand what you mean. And yeah, I mean, I think part of me wonders, and this is one of those things that I would like to ask him. Maybe he's already said this. It's been a while since I read On Writing. Maybe he says it in there, but like, what was the problem that he knew where the story was going to end up and he just didn't know how to get where he was to that point? Or was the story he just didn't even know the shape of the story from this point going forward? And so like I don't know the answer to that question, but it changes what the goal of this explosion was from just a writing perspective, because it's like, it was the problem I don't know what to do with Nick, or was the problem I don't know what to do period? It was a problem like, for the past 150, 250 pages, I've been working towards these people setting up a community, and I need to find a way for them to stop caring about that and start caring about the big bad. And I just don't know how to do that. And then this is when that solution came. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but
yeah, I mean, that feels right to me, because the counterfactual would be, okay, Mother Abigail returns. There's no bomb. Mother Abigail returns. Mother Abigail on her deathbed says, you all need to go to Vegas. And they're just like, I really don't want to, like this doesn't feel like we have obligations here. Mother Abigail, we're trying to get the electricity back on. Like, can't we, pursue this some other way? And it just doesn't feel like there's that like narrative propulsion that would really just like it would have felt weird if all of our characters were like, okay, Mother Abigail said, can you imagine Stu being like, well, the old woman said, like without this sort of visceral event happening that really kind of pushed him to do it. It would have felt weird, I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, we're going to talk more about like the thematic implications of that very statement that you said there here in a bit. But I agree, from just a structural perspective, it works. It solves the problem. It cuts that Gordian knot, certainly.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to get into it, Matt?
We are.
Let's go. Chapter 57. Our first chapter of the week begins with some shining as Larry and Leo sit outside drinking some warm drinks, and Leo starts to chat about all the things he's shined from people around town. Larry kind of picks up on what's happening immediately and tests him with some good old Hitchcockian classics, talking about just getting him to repeat things he's thinking. This is like one of the most direct uses and acknowledgement of the shine, as we'll call it, outside of the Dark Tower. Like normally it's like much more mystical and unknowable, but here's just like Leo and Larry are just having a full-on conversation. And one of them is doing it in his mind.
Yeah, it's very fun, definitely. And of course, I love your allusion to Hitchcock, because we also have a bomb under the table situation here, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't do the allusion to Hitchcock. It was North by Northwest was the movie that he was referencing there. That's a Hitchcock movie.
Right, but also it's a meta reference.
Because I'm just saying, don't give me credit for that. That's all. That's all, Stephen.
So, but it's like a joke, right? It's like he's making a joke where he's doing Hitchcock references, but the Hitchcock references are basically pulling our character to think about the fact that there's a bomb under the table, which is the ultimate Hitchcock reference.
Do you think? I know the answer to this question. I know what you're going to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway because that's what a podcast is for. Do you think King knowingly did that?
Totally.
Yeah, I do too. I that's the exact kind of thing he would think is absolutely hilarious.
Because he could have picked any movies like Hitchcock. I mean, you could even go so far as to say that the reason why the white drove the suggestions of Hitchcock films into Larry's mind was so that he would have the idea of a bomb on his mind or something, but yeah, like I don't know. It's great. We want Larry to look under the table, and
we do
because that's the bomb under the table. That's the illusion. Yeah. Anyway,
one of these days it's going to be like, guys, Hitchcock didn't actually even say that. We're going to be like, fuck. No, he did though. It was him. We haven't ever reviewed a Hitchcock movie on the Doofcast ever. Not once in almost 200 episodes. We've never done Hitchcock. Isn't that wild?
That is wild. Yeah.
We need to fix that. Yeah. All right. So then the conversation turns to Nadine. Leo almost goes into a trance, and in this trance, he tries to warn Larry as best as he can about what is coming, but he's a little vague. I love the quote here. Leo's voice rose, became even shriller. It's all written down. Franny knows. Talk to Franny. The committee, not the committee. The committee won't help you. It won't help anyone. The committee is the old way. He laughs at your committee because it's the old way, and the old ways are his ways, Franny knows. If you talk together, you can. And then he wakes up, unfortunately. So lots to talk about here. I think yeah, we're going to have a lot to say about the idea of the committee as not being the solution when we get to Mother Abigail and what she says to our characters, but definitely this concept is being introduced here. So I wanted to talk to you about this a little bit more.
For sure, the old ways are his ways is such a great short pithy way of saying it, and it's the most direct textual reference to this idea that we've been talking about, that it has been a huge mistake for them to try to resurrect the dead world in the form that they find comfortable and familiar, because that is the world where Flag is comfortable. You could even say that that way of living, the way of living they're trying to resurrect in Boulder, is a sort of evil way of living, at least according to the metaphysics of this book.
Right. Flag was America, right? Like quintessential Americana is what Flag was defined by the book as. And so, yes, like the idea of resurrecting America as it was is feeding into exactly what Flag wants. So I love this concept. I mean, we will indeed have more to say about it when Mother Abigail's part of the book comes around, but here we go. We're working towards establishing this fact. And I think that the details of the theming of this become more and more clear as we move on, especially this week, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So Larry does what he's told and goes to talk to Franny, who now, when given the option, finally reveals all of her worries and anxieties about Harold, finally telling Larry all about this.
Yeah. I always think it's interesting how goddamn satisfying it can be for two characters to just talk to each other. I don't want this to come off as critical, because I don't really think I was feeling any kind of frustration, but like, I wanted to ask you, like, does this sort of dramatic irony work on you? Because I know you have pet peeves about withholding information from the reader, but yours is specifically a pet peeve about withholding that information from the reader, whereas this is just two characters who kind of both have pieces of a puzzle who aren't talking to each other. That is something that tends to annoy me personally. I tend to not like that, although I didn't dislike it here. I guess I'm just pointing it out. Maybe I'm pointing it out because I'm curious why it didn't bother me even.
Yeah, I mean, so my specific problem with this kind of conflict is when there's no natural reason for the characters to not be talking to each other about these things, like where they don't even put in the work to maybe explain why a character would withhold information. Like I think my version of this trope that I can't stand is like when, you know, someone walks in the room and sees someone doing something and they're like, no, I can explain. And she's like, no, and storms out. And then like, so they're broken up now. And I'm just like there's no and it's like desperately trying to, like, there's no situation in which you wouldn't actually get to explain something. Like I hate when it's just a stupid misunderstanding that is creating conflict, and that misunderstanding could be very, very easily resolved if characters behave at all human and just like explain something that takes 5 seconds to people. I think in this particular instance, the reason I think this doesn't bother me in particular is because it has been so established. King has put in the work to understand why Franny feels so conflicted and confused about Harold, that she both feels this motherly sense of protection for him, that she needs to take care of him, she needs to keep him safe, and also this deep uncomfortable anxiety about him and what he could possibly be capable of. And these two things are constantly at battle inside Franny, and she just it's causing this indecision. She doesn't know what to do. She does, like, telling someone else her worries about Harold would be in her mind kind of damning him and creating the worst version of him that she's afraid of in her head. And so she just can't bring herself to do that. And now, is the book saying like that's a fatal flaw, that if she had done this earlier, maybe none of this would ever happened? I don't know. I don't think so. But I think the reason why this in particular doesn't bother me here is because to me, it always made sense why Franny was afraid to tell anyone, especially Stu, about Harold.
Yeah, I agree. You know, the other thing that we've talked about a few times is that it's the better angels of their nature, right? It's the fact that all these characters are like, you know, we kind of owe it to the kid to give him a chance to grow and you know, like, you know, he's had a hard time just like everybody, and all these things where you're like, you know, I like where your heart is at, but you're just wrong in this case.
Yeah.
And that kind of allows you to you know, forgive the characters for missing something, I think.
Yeah. I think one thing that is universally true about Harold and the way people reacted and treated him was that they consistently underestimated him. They underestimated his ability to be intelligent and solve problems, and also underestimated what he is fully capable of, the horrors that he is capable of.
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, that certainly is their flaw. But yeah, this did not bother me at all. I do have a pet peeve about withholding information. Mine, you're right, is specific to the reader. Like, like if you have the go-to example I have is if two people are having a phone call and we're in one of the characters' heads, and then like the details of the phone call are withheld from us just so we can do a fun reveal 5 minutes later. It's just like, come on, come up with a better way of masking that information.
Right. It's one of those things that just reminds you you're reading a book, right?
Yep. Yeah. So they kind of talk and they decide that they realize that the thing that they're talking about here is the ledger that Harold wrote, of course. Before we move on to that, there's just something I wanted to note here as Franny is talking to Larry. Just like, I really love the writing in this section, and this whole, all these chapters as a whole. I really love one thing I think King is very specifically doing in these chapters is referencing sunrise and sunset a lot, and using the imagery of sunrise and sunset to set the mood of what is happening in the Boulder Free Zone. And I just love, like, as Franny kind of reveals more and more about the darkness of Harold, what is happening in the background. As she talked, the last bright daylight changed to a bluish shade. The lovers in the park began to drift away. The thin rind of moon rose. In the high-risk condominium on the far side of Canyon Boulevard, a few Coleman gas lamps had come on. So, like, as she tells this, it darkens, the whole sun sets and Boulder grows dark, and it's just this wonderful image to go along with this terrible news and the full scope of Harold revealed.
Yeah, I think we're meant to get the feeling that the sun is setting on the Boulder Free Zone one way or another. It really is a great image, and you know, it kind of helps to remind me, like, it's Yeah, like so they're in a a city area, but like they don't have any electricity, and so it just helps to remind my brain that like, oh yeah, so the sun is going down, but that doesn't mean like, oh, you've got like street light illumination and warm incandescent light coming from within houses. No, it's very, very dark, and then here and there you've got gas lamps that are being turned on manually. So it's just it's a different image than maybe you would imagine by default. So I just appreciate King kind of reminding us of some of these details.
Yeah. So as we said, they basically reason out that the thing Leo is talking about here is Harold's ledger, which we remember now that Larry like immediately found on the first day he met Harold. He's just like immediately saw it. They talk about how it is interesting that they both immediately found it, or rather Franny did not find the ledger, but she did sit down on the hearth and notice the loose stone on her first visit, though of course she didn't open it. And Franny's response to this is, there it is again, as if someone had us by the nose, was leading us to it. Who could that be?
Yeah, as if. No, I mean, I think today we'll talk quite a bit about the idea of the white and how the white has been trying to help them. But I guess, just pulling out specific moments like this, it's almost the story fucking with us, because it's like King reminding us that like, hey, the characters almost found the ledger twice. If they had found it either of those times, maybe things would have been different, but now they got to go get it, and everything is going to be too late. And like, I'm not, the way I said that sounds like I'm like annoyed with the way he did this. I'm not actually. It's just funny to me that he's like, he is the storyteller. And so when he draws attention to stuff like that, he's drawing your attention to the fact that he's been screwing with you this whole time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it raises interesting questions about the white, which I know you said we're going to talk about later, and we will. But like, one of the things I find most fascinating about this whole thing is the two of them decide the next day that they are going to go break into Harold's and read the ledger. And in most situations, well, that wouldn't mean anything, because we saw that Harold moved it after he realized Franny had broken in. But we have this fact that was introduced last week, and we're reminded of this week, that for some reason Nadine finds the ledger and moves it right back to where it was the first time, back under the hearthstone. And so now we're like, something has us by the nose indeed, right? It's something made Nadine move it back. For what purpose? And then this is when you go down the rabbit hole with this thing. What is the purpose of this? Like, if as we're going to posit a little bit, that the white wanted the bomb to go off for a specific reason, why? What does finding the ledger do? It doesn't stop it. It doesn't stop it from happening. It just, I guess, allows them to know the truth of, I don't know. Like, I don't have answers here, but it's just really fascinating.
Well, as we get up to this point, so my feeling is that the white is trying to help them stop the bomb completely.
Okay.
It's just the white is not omnipotent. The white is being sort of matched blow for blow with Randall Flagg. Like everything Flagg is doing to kill and maim and destroy, the white is sort of barely like doing its best to try to stop it. And in the end, it's you could almost view what ends up happening as a kind of stalemate is probably the wrong word, but a kind of incomplete success on both sides, because as we're going to see, the bomb definitely doesn't kill as many people as Flagg wanted to. And it also does, they also don't totally foil the plot and, capture Harold, right? It's a partial, and also Flagg gets Nadine out of the bargain too. So on the whole, I think it's just this is a world where the light and the dark are sort of well balanced at this point, which gives us a feeling of tension as our heroes are going to leave at the end of the week's reading, and go west. It's like I have no certainty that they're going to win, or even if they win, no certainty that it's going to be some kind of amazing triumphant slam dunk victory. Like they could all very well die in the course of winning, and that would be this sort of Pyrrhic victory, sacrificial victory that the god as depicted in this story would be totally comfortable with.
Yeah, I want to talk about this more when we get to the explosion and Mother Abigail and all this stuff itself, but I'm not sure if I agree with the sentiment that the White didn't want it to happen or was actively trying to stop it from happening. But
yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I think there is some evidence the other way too. But yeah, let's wait until we get there to talk about that.
Okay, but regardless, I think this is fascinating stuff to me. Like I love the detail that Nadine moved it back is included in this whole thing, because it throws this wonderful wrinkle into this thing that I love. Yeah. So we move on to September 1st, the day before the meeting and the day that we know Harold will make everything go boom. It's the day that the power comes back on briefly, and I love how we see Nick look at this, especially knowing what we know about what his eventual fate will be. The text says, "For Nick, the feeling was the exact opposite of the dread he had known when the lights went out in Shoyo. Not one of entombment now, but of resurrection." Look, I'm not saying that Nick is Jesus, but it's not Kingslingers if we don't call at least one character in a book a Christ figure. So here he is.
Yeah.
Nick, the Jesus.
Pretty much, I guess.
Am I saying that he's going to be resurrected in 3 days after the explosion, Matt? Am I saying it? I'm not saying that.
Okay. I didn't think you were. Now maybe. Yeah. It's funny because I tend to compare Nick more to Job, actually.
I don't dislike that. I just like you talk about entombment and resurrection, knowing he's going to die. Sure. And also if you look at we're going to watch this miniseries in a few weeks, but the 2020 version of The Stand, they basically made Nick look as Jesus as possible in this thing.
He looks really extremely great. Jesus. He does.
I put a picture of it in the script for Matt.
The eye patch is even almost like a crown of thorns. It's like sideways,
I love that. So we learned that the generator that they turn on basically melts down almost immediately because everyone in Boulder died without turning off their electric stuff, which is perfect. This is like Scott crafts a brilliant metaphor from the work that maybe was intentionally trying to craft the metaphor, and so I'm not actually doing anything, but I feel like I'm doing something. But like, isn't this a perfect kind of overarching metaphor for this book as a whole? This idea that all the stuff was on and it all shut down, and then we in the Boulder Free Zone are trying to turn it all back on right away, and it can't handle it. It can't handle it. It wasn't prepared. You cannot just turn everything back on. It just doesn't work. You have to make sure the turning off crew goes out there and turns all the stuff off first, gets rid of all the old stuff first. The turning off crew maybe goes to Vegas and deals with the problem. Like if Randall Flagg is supposed to be quintessentially America and all the bad things that come along with it, then I think what the book is saying, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I think what the book is saying is that before you do this stuff, before you make committees, before you rebuild government, before you redo everything, you need to actually deal with the root of the problem. And Randall Flagg is the root of the problem personified. And you need to do that first. You need to turn that stuff off first. And then you can turn on the power again. And then you can build things up again. And then you can talk about what the world will look like. But you're going out of order a little bit here, folks.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't think about that metaphor, but I think I sort of felt that metaphor, which is, I think, often what writers are doing when they use metaphor is they're trying to make you feel a thing. Because part of me felt Nick's triumph that the generators are back on. Yay, we did it. But then there are a lot of story elements that are pushing you to ask whether this is a good thing that they should be working on. At all. Like it seems like I don't know, you've barely survived a ship sinking and you're on the life raft, and then you're like, all right, time to what kind of margarita do you want? Like it's like it's not time for that yet. Like having the electricity running is like a huge luxury, which I understand. It makes everyone feel comfortable and safe and like they're on familiar ground. But like maybe you shouldn't be feeling comfortable and safe and like you're on familiar ground. It's not time for that yet. You're still in danger, right?
Yeah. Well, and this general idea that the reason they're pushing the electricity so much is because if winter comes and we're stuck in Boulder, Colorado in the middle of winter without any, central heating that electricity can provide us, we're just all fucked. And the like that goes along with the question of like, why did you have us all gather in Boulder? Why did you have us establish our community in Boulder? And the answer is you weren't supposed to establish a fucking community. This is not supposed to be the finish line. You're not supposed to hang out here. This is supposed to be the jumping off point to the next part of the quest. And so, yeah, I think you're right. It is certainly logical for them to want electricity and the benefits and the comforts and the survivability that will provide in winter in Boulder, Colorado. But that's not what God wants from them.
Mm-hmm. And this is me going beyond the text a bit, but I don't think I'm entirely wrong in saying, as an engineer, I'm thinking about like the whole supply chain that goes into having like a running electricity generator and where's the fuel coming from? What are you going to do when it needs repairs and you don't have like everything you need on hand to repair it? Because that's going to happen. Like maybe you have enough fuel left over for some period of time, but at a certain point the fuel will run out. Fuel goes bad eventually. You're going to need to make more. Okay, what's the plan for that? Do you think you have enough people to resuscitate the entire like energy infrastructure of the country so that you can run your electric generator? Like I know that they want the electricity to come back, but I don't think they can really sustain it as like a group of 1,000 people. Like, and on top of all that, you're being punished by God. People like recenter your priorities.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is like a throwaway line later in the chapter where they say, as the time goes on, we will make fuel expeditions into Denver and other areas to pick up some extra fuel to power the generators and things like that. But I think you're right. Like long term, that's not a long term solution. It's a very short term solution.
Yeah, that was my feeling about the whole thing. Is like understandable that they would want to do this, but I think it's premature. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real question here of like what life should look like for the survivors now. Like seriously, even let's go ahead to after the defeat of Randall Flagg, if we get that. Like what is life going to be for these people? What is it going to look like? Because it seems like what they want it to look like is the same. We'll live in these comfy houses that are already here. We'll use this electricity that's already here. We'll eat this food that's already here. We'll, maybe drive these cars that are already here, just like carry on. And I think you're right that in the long term, that's just not going to happen unless there's actually the ability to build that kind of infrastructure. And we just haven't seen that they have the ability to actually do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. This is the first time I'm really thinking of this as a practical problem, but I'm like, obviously you don't, in this situation, you would try to go somewhere like San Francisco where the most extreme weather event you're going to face is an 82-degree heat wave. Like just go somewhere where you don't have to worry about these things, right? Don't go to Boulder. Yeah, it's just, I think it just reinforces what you said, that like this was not meant to be a base of civilization.
Well, does it even make sense for the survivors to live in as big of a community as they're building here in Boulder? Obviously we know like textually why that's happening, but again, as we've learned from Abigail this week, this is not meant to be a place where you build a community actually. Right. So does it make sense? Does it make sense for at this stage of post-pandemic survival for thousands of people to all live in the same place together?
Also no, for the reason that it's like, okay, well, you're going to run out of like canned food at some point. And you were just in like farm world and then you left there and came to Boulder. Like obviously if you're at this level of technological development, you want to be living somewhere where you can grow your own food easily. And for 1,000 people too. Or you spread out enough where you don't have 1,000 people all in one place. But it's like, yeah, this is weird. It's so funny that the book is like hoodwinked me into not thinking about this until now. That's why I kind of keep going on this. But I'm like, no, like this is a terrible idea. like why on earth would they think that they can just like resuscitate a little New England township and just have that work when there's no country around them to actually support that?
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
I love it.
Yeah.
So Franny and Larry break into Harold's house and find his ledger. There's this wonderful Stephen King moment here where Franny, as she's crawling through the basement, sees the little snippings of wire and the empty walkie-talkie box that is left over from Harold's bomb creation. And she's just like, you can feel she's close to making the connection or something, or making a conclusion, and she just doesn't quite get there. And that's just King being mean to us, just knowing that we know and that he knows and that his characters just don't quite know.
Yeah, there's just for sure a lot of stuff like that this week.
So they read Harold's ledger, and of course they are as horrified as you think they would be. Once again, King kind of only gives us little glimpses of this thing, right? We've really only, in the text of the book, see 2 quotes from Harold's ledger. We've seen one of them before. That's when Harold kind of muses about how pride is not so bad of a sin, actually. And we get one new one here. So I thought we could at least look at this and try to break it down. So Harold says, to follow one star is to concede the power of some greater force, some providence. Yet is it still not possible that the act of following itself is the taproot of even greater power? Your God, your devil, owns the keys to the lighthouse. I have grappled with that so long and hard in the last 2 months, but to each of us he has given the responsibility of navigation. All right, Matt, break this down for me.
So yeah, I confess that when this came up on the audiobook, I just kind of let it pass because I wasn't really sure what to make of it. But having seen how everything played out and thinking about it, so following your stars is of course linked to the idea of fate and predestination, and your path is chosen for you. But I think Harold is saying, if you choose to follow God or if you choose to follow the devil, you're following either way. But and once you've chosen that path, there's no free will in either path. So the only place for free will and thus for power over your own fate is which way you choose, and perhaps to a degree how you go about it. But I think what Harold is saying here is he's like, I will be a man who is the captain of his soul. I will choose. Okay, how do I choose? Well, the only way for me to choose is basically for me to choose to do something horrible, because then I know for sure that I'm choosing my own path. Really, I think it's a bunch of bullshit sophistry that we've come to expect from Harold, but I think that's what he is trying to say.
Yeah, I think I took a little bit of a different meaning of it than you. I mean, I think, not that I disagree with what you're saying. I look at this quote, and what I see is this idea that as a follower, there is this feeling that you have no power, right? Your God, your devil owns the keys to the lighthouse. They own it. The lighthouse being the thing that guides you. But to each of us, he has given the responsibility of navigation, meaning the lighthouse is there to guide you home, but you still have to navigate, right? You still have to make those choices. It's kind of it, I think, very intentionally echoes something that Mother Abigail says later, this idea of, do we have free will? Do we have a choice? And her response is matter of factly, yeah, of course you have a choice. This is the way. I'm showing you the way. Here's my lighthouse. It's shining bright for you. This is what I want you to do. But you still have to decide if you're going to do it. If you're going to navigate towards that lighthouse. And so I think he's definitely wrestling with this idea of, do I want to be the person that kind of pledges myself to a higher power? Like he says, your God, your devil, but in his mind, I think he's thinking about flag, and he's thinking about these things. And he's thinking about, am I going to be this person that is going to, allow myself to be a follower of some greater force? And is there still nobility in being a follower? And in his mind, he's talking about following the bad people, but this is a greater theme of this whole thing, right? Where all of our characters are basically, by the end of these chapters, pledged to be followers, to put their lives in the hand of some greater force that they don't fully understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like that as well. I agree with what you said. Yeah, I think because we have sort of seen. I mean, Harold hasn't seen this, but we have seen in other stories than this one that like people can get immense power by giving themselves over entirely to the white, for example.
Yeah.
And I guess you could say the darkness too. If you view Flag as an example of that.
I think the bad Harold part of this is that the act of following itself is the taproot of even greater power. That by following you can tap into some source of greater power. He's using this to justify, I will be like I said, I will be a prince when I go with Flag. Like, this is my way of getting even more power of following, and he's a fool in that. Like Stu, and the rest of them, when they make this decision to follow at the end of the chapter, I don't think they're doing it because they're getting they're hoping to get some greater reward, some greater power.
Right.
They're doing it in spite of the fact that they know it will most likely mean their death. They're not working for a selfish goal there, and that's, I think, the fundamental difference between them and Harold here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
All right, so while Larry and Franny are finding out the truth about Harold, Nadine is busy sealing the fate of the rest of the Free Zone Committee. We see here that she sneaks into Ralph's house and places Harold's bomb in the living room closet. And at this point, I wonder, for those of our readers that didn't know the bomb was 100% going to go off like you did, I wonder if at that point you're like, oh no, it's going off. At what point does a person that doesn't know go, like, oh, they're not going to be able to stop this thing, that this is just going to happen?
I feel like unfortunately I can't say because I was spoiled by Stephen King. But I feel like even up until the moment the bomb goes off, you're not sure that the way it's written, right? The way it's written, you feel like there's a chance that Nick is going to get there just in the nick of time and pull the wires out, right? But I don't know. Could be wrong.
Yeah, certainly. So as she begins to walk out of the house, she has one final chance to stop herself. We haven't talked much, Matt, about Nadine's like overarching life philosophy. I think we introduced it when it was introduced, and then we haven't said much about it, but it is something that Nadine repeats over and over again. That is, in a world where so many have died, the one great sin is to take a human life. This is something that I actually believe that she legitimately fully believes. I think this is something she absolutely believes, and she's going against it here. She's going to do it anyway. I love this. I love this idea that in a world where so many people have died, to kill more people, can there be something more monstrous than that? And yet it doesn't stop her.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that we are actually being built up to the moment thinking, oh, she's not going to go through with it, right? Like this is a step too far, except she has walked right up to the precipice and is close enough to the precipice that Flag can just kind of push her over, which is what's about to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good read of what happens here and why, right? Because it's at this moment that Flag enters Nadine, and not in the sex way, or is it? I don't know. What happens here is we see that Nadine kind of completely blacks out, and when she wakes up, she's in a different place. But right before she blacks out, we get this quote that I wanted to talk to you about, because she just randomly has the thought: penetration, entropy. She didn't know what those words meant put together like that. She only knew that they were right. So what are your thoughts on penetration : entropy?
I mean, the penetration part just seems to be kind of obviously to me like she's been penetrated by some kind of presence. The entropy part, not usually a word that King uses, but it's basically a synonym for chaos or discordia, you could say. Maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but Flag and his sort of nature of chaos and discordia and entropy is able to surge at this one critical moment and penetrate and control Nadine and thus complete his long planned attack.
Yeah, I think also penetration, is obviously has a very explicit sexual
right
meaning as well. So this idea that, the one thing that we've kind of been told here, I think Abigail says it later, that like he has his bride and he'll make a child with her, right? And so like this idea that this penetration, this penetrative act will create entropy, will create disorder, will create chaos.
Yeah, which is interesting. And maybe I'm saying this because I just was listening to a podcast about molecular biology. But the act of human reproduction, or any sexual reproduction, is one of profound creation of order, right? You create one single cell, which then it has enough order kind of imbued in it. It's almost magical when you think about it, that it's able to unfold itself into another human, which is just an incredible kind of order. Right. It's almost unbelievable that it works at all. So it's a contrast. I guess I'm just in this moment, I'm viewing that as a contrast between order and disorder.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I completely agree. That that's kind of how I view creation, as the opposite of entropy. It is almost explicitly the opposite of it. And so here we have the idea of penetration. We have the idea of sex. We have the idea of the thing that creates life being framed as chaos, as entropy. It's remarkable. I love it.
Yeah.
So Nadine wakes up after her possession, and there's a whole lot of imagery to talk about here, Matt. She looks around and she looks in front of her and she sees whiteness. Hell was whiteness, the thesis to the dark man's antithesis. She saw white ivory bleached out nothingness. White, white, white. It was white hell, and it was everywhere. She stared at the whiteness. It was impossible to stare into it, fascinated, agonized for minutes before she realized she could feel the fork of the Vespa between her thighs, and that there was another color, green, at the periphery of her vision. I think this would have like a charged meaning in any book, just like you have the dark man, and then you have her possessed by the dark man and wakes up in whiteness. But like in a King book where the white itself plays a significant role in his omniverse, it's like especially so. So I think the other thing to mention here is that we find out a little bit later that this experience has turned Nadine's hair completely white, that all the black parts of her hair are completely gone now and completely white. And I gotta ask you, what are we doing with this here, Matt? Like, what is this white versus black dichotomy, and why is it happening now with what's going on with Nadine?
I really don't know. It's a pretty strong break from what we've seen as the symbolic pattern for the whole King verse, right? I mean, what has happened to her, right, is she's been sort of spiritually shoved out of her own body and into limbo, and to her the limbo appears white. Now, is it the white? I don't know. I mean, I could reach and I could say, well, maybe like the white is taking mercy on her and holding her soul until Flag is done with her body. I'm like, I don't really think that's it, though. Honestly, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I mean, one just simple, probably too superficial explanation is just like, it feels more hefty to say that, she's just surrounded by this terrifying whiteness than it would be if it were just like she's surrounded by blackness, because it's like, hey, we all see black every time we close our eyes to go to sleep. It's not that scary, right?
Sure.
It's not weird. But when you say you're surrounded by white hell, it's like, okay, that's uncanny in a way that actually works.
To be clear here, the whiteness that she's seeing when she opens her eyes is a movie screen at a drive-in theater. That's like where she finds herself. So like, which is another interesting little wrinkle on this whole thing. Like, why take her here? Why put her in front of this? I mean, I love this as like, it's so interesting because the transformation of her hair to be fully white seems to mean the opposite of what it should mean, right? Like, you would think that if we're trying to show a person that has been fully subsumed into darkness, into the power of the dark man, of the man in black, of Randall Flagg, you would think that their hair would go from white to dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would think it would be the opposite of that. You would think that she's fully subsumed by the blackness. She would wake up and she would not see. I mean, I think it's a reflection of the turmoil that's happening here. You know, like, she has kind of fully committed herself to this dark path now, and that's why hell becomes whiteness. That's why the terrible things are white. Now, why is her hair white? Because I think it reflects her misery and terror and conflict. In that, like, she has fully been taken over by the darkness now, and her outward reflection of that is complete whiteness. And I don't know. It's just really fascinating to me. I don't know the answer here.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer either. It's like I just said, it doesn't really fit any of the patterns that I'm used to, and it's not that everything has to fit a pattern. It's just when you're trying to make things make sense, it's helpful to have a pattern.
Sure. So Flag tells Nadine through drive-in speakers that the good guys have figured out their plans. They know everything except about the bomb. And so Nadine and Harold must get out of town quickly. They have to go back up to that amphitheater that he originally met her out with the Ouija board. So we're going to be talking about this a lot today, but I think one of the things that I find really interesting is this idea how the forces of good and evil communicate with their we'll call them pawns, we'll call them, servants, we'll call them soldiers, because it seems like the forces of evil are really explicit. They're just like, hey, Joe knows, he knows, here's what he knows, here's what to do, go do it. Whereas the forces of good are a lot of times just like, I'm gonna give you a funny feeling, or like some kid's gonna go in a trance and say, like, it's written down. Whereas I think Flag would say the book, the ledger, it's in the Hearthstone. Yeah. Like, it's just really interesting the ways in which these two forces communicate. Right. And saying this, acknowledging the fact that also at the end of the section, the forces of good communicate through Abigail rather explicitly. But I don't know. I find it really, really fascinating how these two sides throughout the course of the book have kind of, one's been much more vague than the other.
Yeah, right, for sure. The obvious, contrast between like the loudspeakers blaring so loud that they like blow themselves up versus, nudges and hints supplied by the white.
Feelings.
I totally agree. And I don't, I was thinking about this I was thinking like, okay, well, one way to see this is like, well, the darkness is stronger because the darkness can make much bigger, bolder statements. And it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe it's that the white like respects human agency more, and it could, if it wanted to, tell people what to do, but it kind of tries to avoid that and kind of tries to let them, honor what's in their heart and do the right thing. Or you could even say the white can't like tell you to be a good person. Like that just doesn't work. Like it wouldn't matter if it blared over loudspeakers. Like, don't kill people like that. So it just doesn't lend itself to the same tools in the first place, and thus it does. I don't know. I'm reaching for something there, because I don't think that King thinks that like, well, the darkness is a more powerful force and that's why it's able to be more overt. I think he thinks the opposite, actually. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is something that I think we've talked about several times throughout the course of this season and the show as a whole. This idea of when the white does and does not intervene directly. There are several cases in the Dark Tower and in the other books where the white will directly intervene and be like, hey, look, the weapon you hold now, it's super powered now. Congratulations. You've got my power. And then there's other instances where terrible, horrible things happen and the white is nowhere to be found. And it's really fascinating to me the ways in which that intervention plays out. And I think this is another example of it where the white is kind of sort of intervening, but not as directly as Flag is, as the power of the Crimson King, if we want to call it that, is intervening in the events.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm drawing a elaborate web of yarn on a corkboard in my mind, because they're these moments of profound power from the white are usually accompanied by like the character, I have to say it, making like their final dramatic stand against evil.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's always how it is very often a self-sacrificial stand against evil.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, I'm in contrast, the forces of evil, they make frequent displays of power, but then they always kind of fold when it comes to that final stand, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's the big difference there.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
So Nadine goes to collect Harold, who is shocked by her hair transformation and by the clearly demonstrable power of the man they've now pledged themselves to. He also learns, of course, that she's planted the bomb. And he has in this moment his final little moment of doubt here. He says, "Maybe I don't want to anymore," Harold whispers. He was still looking at her hair. But she put his hand on it. "Too late, Harold," she said. And that's how our chapter ends. But it's not too late, Harold. I mean, it's not like, let's just play, sliding doors here for a sec, right? Like, if Harold says, "Nuh-uh," and like says, "Fuck you," and runs away and runs to Stu and Franny and is like, or runs to Ralph's and like runs to Ralph's, kicks the door down, runs into the closet, pulls the bomb out and goes like, "Look, I built this thing. I'm super sorry. I was an idiot. I was being manipulated, but I take full responsibility. Please forgive me. Let's get this thing out of here." Like, I mean, they're not going to like throw a parade for him, but they're probably not going to like crucify him, right? I mean,
right.
Like, it's not too late. It's not too late.
Yeah, it's probably not actually too late. I mean, you can see that he would feel like it's too late. I think what it's too late for is sort of the future that Harold wanted in the town, or would have wanted if he were smart enough to want it.
Yeah.
Where he is just accepted by everyone and regarded highly. At this point, everyone will, at the very least, they found your journal. They know you're a weirdo. Even if you beg for forgiveness and go in for rehabilitation or whatever, however you want to spin it, the shame is still more than Harold is willing to bear. So if Harold were not Harold, then it wouldn't be too late. But
all right, that's fair.
Yeah, that's exactly why Harold was chosen, as the agent. So.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. All right, so we move on to our second chapter, chapter 58. At the beginning of this chapter, we catch up with Franny and Larry sitting in the kitchen while Stu is in the other room reading Harold's ledger. I love this little detail that Leo is also in this moment downstairs playing the guitar. We know it was established that he loves the guitar, and we learn here that he's playing better than Larry does or ever will, Larry says, which is delightful, like that he's like, I don't know, like this whole section just once again demonstrates how different this man is, because there's a moment where Leo starts playing "Baby Can You Dig Your Man" on the guitar, and Larry is of course visibly uncomfortable by that, and Franny recognizes the song and even has the name of the singer on the tip of her tongue, but Larry just says, "Oh yeah, probably, I don't know, probably some pop guy that came and went," and he doesn't say, "Yeah, that was me." I love that. Why doesn't he admit to it, Matt?
Yeah, so I was waiting for the moment when the song would come up in the story, in an overt way like this. And I guess I'm not really surprised to see Larry disown it, because, I go back to the place that the role that the song took within the story, which is, this is Larry's big break that brought him the big paycheck, which he then immediately used to throw a bunch of cocaine-fueled ragers, and then he had to flee from the West Coast to hide out with his mom, in shame, and furthermore, on the song, Larry doesn't sound like Larry. Like it makes a point of the idea that Larry is taking on a whole sort of different persona for the song, and that it works, of course. But here Larry is being somebody else. He's being the somebody that the world wants him to be, and that's what earns him accolades. And now Larry is himself. Larry has figured out who he is. He's figured out how to walk his own path. He's done pretending to be somebody else just for the praise. And so it makes sense to me that he would have feel the need to distance himself from the song.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's really interesting because like you could see a situation where Larry says, "Oh, that was me, but it was a different person. I didn't like who that person was, and I've changed, so I don't like talking about it." But I think to Larry, that's not enough. Like he wants to distance himself so much that he doesn't even want people to think about him being that person. That like even them just knowing that he was that person hurts his ability to form this new person that he is.
That makes sense. Yeah. I do feel like there might be another "Baby, Can You Dig Your Man" moment before the story ends, but I also wouldn't feel dissatisfied if this were just the resolution, right? It comes up, Larry pretends he doesn't know what it is. Like that actually feels like a meaningful moment to me, all by itself.
Yeah. So Sue finishes reading the ledger, and after a quick conversation about Watership Down, which you should listen to us talk about on the book club at the end of the month, they try to figure out what to do with Harold and Nadine. The conclusion that they come to here, Matt, is exile, which I'm pretty sure isn't constitutional.
Should be.
This is the problem with adopting the Constitution. It's like, what are we going to do? We can't just put him in jail. I guess exile?
Isn't it kind of funny that exile isn't an existing punishment in our culture? Because it seems like it used to be a pretty major, reliable punishment.
Yeah. I don't want to have to take care of you in prison, so just go away.
Yeah.
I don't want you here. Like, yeah, I mean, like, well, because practically, like, you're going to kick an American citizen out of the country? That's not going to work.
Yeah, just put them on a boat. Go somewhere else.
I mean, we exile people from other countries all the time. We do it every day, but just citizens of our country, we just don't do that. Can you? Is that like? Do local townships like have the ability to just tell someone you can't be in our town anymore? I don't know if they do.
I don't think so. No, I don't think they do. I mean, there's sort of the Rambo thing where the cop is just like, keep walking, but I don't think that's like legally enforced.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to hold up in court.
Yeah.
Hey, judge, I told him to keep walking, and he did not keep walking.
Yeah, I tried harassing him, and it didn't work.
Yeah. I don't know. So they decide, of course, that whatever they're going to do, they'll wait till the committee meeting the following morning to do something about it. Which of course we know is exactly when the bomb's going to go off. So we're getting the it's too late vibes pretty hard here now.
Yeah. Right. This is one of my misunderstandings, frankly, is I didn't get that like the community meeting wasn't like a full town meeting. I didn't quite grasp the difference between, but anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. That's your own fault, man. It says pretty clearly
it was pretty clear. Yeah.
So from here, we cut over to Harold again. He's sitting in the amphitheater looking down on Boulder below him. And I think this is, as King kind of builds it up, the final moment for Harold, right? The last threshold to be crossed, the last moment of choice. Mm-hmm. And we see here Harold still has some serious doubts. And it's even more than doubts. He kind of has all illusions ripped away from him, right? Like he thinks, we'll come back, though, driving chariots. But in his secret heart, Harold doubted that. The darkness was upon him in more ways than one. The vile bastards had stolen everything from him. Franny, his self-respect, then his ledger, now his hope. He felt like he was going down. So he knows the score, right? He knows this is not going to work out for him. He knows he's not going to win. And he's still blaming them for stealing his self-respect, which you did that yourself, buddy. But he knows that he's doomed. And yet, despite this knowledge, he's going to continue on. Anyway.
Yeah, it's that school shooter mentality where he figures he might as well take everybody else with him if he's going down.
It is indeed. And I will say once again, it is kind of remarkable how prescient of a character Harold is in this world. And I think it's not actually prescient. It's just that this is kind of like timeless human behavior that we've just unfortunately seen, rear its head a lot in the recent years, with young people specifically like Harold. And it's not fun to see, but it's scary. It's scary looking at this character created in 1978 and seeing how easily he slots into 2022 with very little changes at all.
That's been a kind of recurring, surprising thing is King being able to sort of pin down a sort of type of human being, where one might feel inclined to say like, this is like a modern phenomenon. And, it's like, you can probably find it somewhere in Plato's Republic if you look hard enough. Like it never is a new kind of human being. And Stephen King is just really good at nailing those things down and making it really clear. So,
yeah, I agree. So the story picks up from here as the Free Zone committee meeting is wrapped to order. And here we go. The tension of this sequence is just, I think it's absolutely incredible here. What I love about the opening of this whole part is that King is so explicit with the geography of the scene at the beginning, like he goes and describes where everyone is sitting, right? Glenn sat with Larry on the curving lip of the freestanding fireplace. Nick, Susan, and Ralph sat on the couch. Nick held the inevitable pen and pad of paper. Brad Kitchener was standing just inside the doorway, talking to Al Bundell. Franny was sitting with her back propped comfortably against the door of the closet where Nadine had planted the bomb. He is drawing a complete picture for you here. And it's not that King isn't a very descriptive writer. I'm not saying that, but he seems to be like a little bit more explicit with where everyone is and who is here and where they are. And just like, here's the geography of the room. You can see it. You can kind of start drawing a mental map of, okay, well, the bomb's going to blow out this way. And okay, so they're all dead for sure. It's so good, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's letting you stew in the tension. That was my impression is and he's almost kind of winding around the room toward the bomb, which just increases the tension even further. And then finding that Franny has her back against the door, you're like, it's just too much, right? It's great.
It is really great. I love how King chooses to structure this next few beats here, where he cuts back and forth between the committee and Harold and Nadine several times, and that just also helps ramp up the tension as like Nadine's like, is it time? Is it time? Is it time? And Harold's like, not yet, not yet. And then we cut back to the committee, and then we cut back to him. We just don't know when it's going to happen, and it's just remarkable. I also like. I don't know why, but I really was into this little detail that King included here, where like Nadine has to go squat behind a bush and piss in the middle of this whole buildup. It's such like, it's so unnecessary, but also like paints the perfect picture of what they're doing, of the terribleness of what they're doing. I don't know. That's just like in the middle of this tense waiting, she's got to go pee on a bush. I don't know. I just like, you just wonder in the writing process, it was like, oh, I have to have her do this. I have to have her in the middle of this whole thing. Oh, she's got to go take a piss. I don't know. I just, it really, I just like it. I don't know why. I just liked it.
Yeah. It's kind of a very sort of immediate animal touch. It's just realistic, I think, you know. I don't know. I agree though. I like it too. It really kind of sells the moment.
Yeah. So back at the committee, Franny suddenly has a premonition, a feeling that they need to get out of here right now. And so as far as we know, Matt, Franny does not have any kind of like shine like powers, right? We haven't seen her have any kind of, outside of the dreams, any kind of premonition power. So we have to kind of conclude that this feeling was implanted by God, the white, whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, this harkens back to something we were talking about a little bit ago, that like, to me, I felt like the white is just like screaming, basically. Like the white is pulling out all the stops to try to get everyone out of there, just like desperately trying to save its champions. And, you know, speaking at such a loud psychic volume that even the people who have demonstrated no previous psychic talent can hear. And so that's part of why I said earlier that like, it seems to me that the white is doing everything that it can to avert this disaster, and it just fails to do so. That's what it feels like in this moment. Now, okay, so now that I've set that pin, we can talk later about the counter evidence. But in this exact moment, I felt like I felt like, really, really sort of pulling at all the stops.
Yeah. Sure. We'll talk.
Yeah.
So Franny isn't the only thing that gets people moving, though, because in this same moment, a group of motorcycles shows up at the house to inform the committee that Mother Abigail has returned and she's in terrible shape and they need to get to her right away. And in that chaos, most of the people all leave the house. Franny isn't the only... it's just chaos, right? It's just chaos. All this stuff is happening at once, and most of the people leave the house. Not all of them, though.
Yeah. I mean, Franny is sort of the first stone to tumble that starts the avalanche, right?
Yeah,
if she hadn't insisted that everybody get outside, then I think there would have been a lot more stragglers. The motorcycles by themselves wouldn't have gotten everyone outside. I think the the quote unquote coincidence of the bikes and Franny's premonition at the same time were required to get, really almost everybody out of the house at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think like we have to give Franny credit in the moment for what she did, for sure.
Yeah.
So Franny isn't the only one that gets some extra sensory gifts in the final moments, though, because suddenly Stu feels something absolutely wrong, and Nick suddenly knows not only that something's wrong, but he knows that there's something in the closet, and he throws open the closet door and he starts digging, and in the last moments he finds the box with the bomb in it, and he of course is not fast enough to do anything about it, though.
Which sort of damns him, right? Like, you get the sense that if he hadn't been given this psychic connection, he would have just left with everybody else. But because he was made aware of the risk, and because he's Nick, he's going to do the right thing. He's going to try to heroically stop the bomb. He is therefore the one holding the bomb when it blows up. So seems bad.
Yeah. Seems like someone wanted that to happen.
But that's horrible, Scott.
It sure is.
That would be a horrible thing to do. Huh.
Sure would.
Okay, well.
So we get the final moment here at last with Harold pressing the button. Then he raised his arm, and at the end of the arm, one finger pointed out of his knotted fist. And in the moment, he was like Babe Ruth, old and almost washed up, pointing to the spot that he was going to hit a home run, pointing for all the hecklers and badmouths in Wrigley Field, shutting them up once and for all. Speaking firmly, but not loudly into the walkie-talkie, he said, "This is Harold Emery Lauder speaking. I do this of my own free will." So first of all, what a fucking child. that he's doing the fucking Babe Ruth called home run bullshit in this moment. It proves that like there is still a part of Harold that this is all just a game. This is all just a game, and he's just playing the game, and he just wants to win, and so it's all just about winning, and so he's going to hit his home run, which will involve killing tons of people. But the thing to me that I love more than anything, the thing that is so quintessentially Harold, that he spouts this bullshit at the end of this thing that this was his doing. He did this of his own free will. But nobody hears it because the one person who is there to hear Harold's bullshit is a deaf man. So his excuses, his final excuse that like this final message literally falls on deaf ears. It's fucking
genius.
Wonderful. It is. Genius. It is.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, so just to tie back to what we were talking about earlier, punctuating this moment with "I do this of my own free will," of course, harkens back to his earlier remark about navigation, right? The choice required to actually take control of your fate and gain the power of following and all that stuff. I think he's actively choosing his damnation here. Yeah, and
which is bullshit. Yeah. Like we know, like not to say that Harold does not have culpability and did not choose to do this, but like he's been manipulated and pushed and prodded and like like everything here is according to an evil asshole's plan.
Totally, right.
And he knows it too. That's why this rings so false to me that I do this on my own free will. It's like, no, you don't.
No,
You didn't really, though. You fucking asshole.
Yes, I agree. It makes him look even more ridiculously childish because I mean Nadine is like right there, and it's like you did. That's why you did this, actually.
Yeah. So the bomb explodes, and we don't actually learn who lives or dies until the next chapter. And I want you to close your eyes and imagine a world in which I said, "All right, that's it for this week," and you have to wait until the next week to find out who lived.
You wouldn't have let that happen, even if the page cuts had fallen that way, would you have, Scott? Would you have?
I mean,
I think you might have.
I set the schedule, and if the schedule says you stop reading here, then you stop reading here.
I guess
that's the rule.
Wouldn't put it past you.
Mm-hmm. No, I would totally have done it.
Yeah, I believe you.
You're lucky.
I know.
So we get to spend. So we get to spend a little bit of time here at the end of the chapter with Nadine and Harold in the aftermath of the explosion. And there's a lot here. There's a whole lot. Harold continues his act of just being just a fucking asshole to Nadine. Like, just like that he's gone from this person who put this woman on a holy sex pedestal to just treating her like shit in like 48 hours is just absolutely remarkable. And Nadine is not handling this well, actually. Like, she's weeping. She like totally is traumatized by what they did. And I love this line here. "Harold, please." She was sick, crying. He could see her face in the dim fire glow and felt pity for her. He forced it out of his heart like an unwelcome drunk who has tried to enter a cozy little suburban tavern where everyone knows everyone else. The irrevocable fact of murder was in her heart forever. The fact shone sickly in her eyes. But so what? It was in his as well, in it and on it, weighing it down like stones.
Yeah. Shame there was nothing you could have done, Harold.
Can we talk about this metaphor a little bit here? That's
the like unwelcome drunk.
He forces it out of his heart like an unwelcome drunk who has tried to enter a cozy little suburban tavern where everyone knows everyone else. That's a bit much. And like we could easily say, like, Stephen, that's just you're having to do too much work to nail this metaphor. Or we could say this is constructed specifically because that's a Harold metaphor. Like, that's something that Harold would construct.
For sure. It felt like this is from Harold's perspective, and this is the sort of metaphor that Harold would use as a sort of attempt to justify. That's the fun thing about being in Harold's head is some amount of it is his tortured self-justifications from his own perspective.
Yeah.
Where stuff like this, where you're like, no, I don't buy that. But I guess it's funny. So yeah.
Yep. So from here, we will leave Harold and Nadine behind. They head into the west. We know, at least at the end of this week's reading, that they are not caught. But we know that they haven't made it to Vegas yet either, at least that we've seen. So we'll hopefully pick up with them in the future. But for now, we will go to the aftermath of the explosion in chapter 59. We wake up with Franny, who is, thank God, not dead. But we learn that some other people definitely are. Of course, we already talked about Nick, who was holding the bomb. Sue Stern also was still in the house, and she died, proving once and for all that Stephen King really hates Susans. And Sue is not enough to escape from the Susan curse.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, I had forgotten that when I made that joke last week that Sue Stern was one of the ones that died. And I was just like, fuck, he really does hate Susans.
No.
Some Susan said something really mean to Stephen when he was younger, and he's never let it go.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and count what I said in response to your joke as a prediction so that I can increase my score slightly.
Great. I love it. Some other names we learn that we don't recognize too many of them, but we also see that Ralph did lose some fingers, and Teddy Wyzak, the man who gave Harold his nickname, is injured and in critical condition. And of course, we learn a little bit later in the chapter that he does indeed pass away. So that is the mortality count here.
Yeah, I think the greatest twist of the knife was us realizing that Harold probably didn't kill nearly as many people as he thought he was going to, but one of the few that he did kill was Teddy Wyzak, like the one guy who really liked him and was really nice to him and generous to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then further, that Teddy didn't die immediately. He probably lived long enough to learn that it was Harold who killed him.
Yeah.
And so it's just this great, like shoving your face in the idea of like, this didn't really accomplish anything that Harold wanted it to, and was just purely a horrible mistake.
Yeah, I like that. I think that brings to mind something I did want to talk about. We've been talking kind of over the last couple of weeks about like the why of Harold trying to be a good part of the community, like why, right? And I think the internal reasoning for Harold is complicated, and we've talked about that. But like the evil Randall Flaggian reason for picking a person that is trying to ingratiate themselves in the community is that it almost makes it worse for them. Like that if everything had gone according to plan, the entire committee would be wiped out. And who would it be that had done it? Favorite, everyone's favorite Boulder resident, Harold Lauder, was the one to do it. And so not only would they feel hopeless at the loss of the committee, that they would be like, this man is so powerful that he can take someone that everyone loves, that is a man of the people, that people get along with, and turn him evil. We're all fucked. We're all fucked. And I don't know. That's not textual, of course. That's just a feeling I got. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I like that too. That's a good point.
So Franny, we learn, has broken her foot and sprained her back because a couch landed on her. But the baby is okay. Once again, so you were wrong, thankfully, about that, Matt.
You can't really blame me though,
no,
because King was very much playing with our anxieties about this. I mean, just the idea that she was going to get crushed by a couch, right? You're like, or I mean, I guess last week we just know like something huge and heavy fell on her, and then and I was like, okay, well, organ damage, probably lost the baby, and then she didn't. And you're like, good. That's one good thing, right? One good surprise out of all this.
Definitely. All in all, though, 7 dead, 20 wounded, but not the decisive blow to the Free Zone committee that Harold and Flag wanted here. Franny's inspiration and Mother Abigail's sudden return has saved many, many lives, and they call it a miracle. A miracle. It's a miracle, man. An actual miracle would have been stopping bomb from. Abigail could have returned a day earlier and been like, there's a bomb. Yeah, it's like when a young child is diagnosed with terminal cancer and somehow lives, and we say it's a miracle, and I'm like, hey, the miracle would be not having a young child get terminal cancer.
Yeah, well,
what's up, White?
Well, Scott, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Fuck that shit.
I mean,
I hate that excuse for like that. I mean, we're about to get into this like hardcore, but like,
right. That's the thing is like, I share your sentiment, but like, isn't that exactly what all this is?
Yes, it is 100% what all this is. But I think it's got the Kingian twist on it, and I want to talk about that because I think King would, to what I just said, also say fuck that shit, because I think he would 100% agree with that, which makes what we're doing here so endlessly fascinating to me. So here we go. Here's our setup for it. They're talking about Mother Abigail, and they say she's not dead yet. She ought to be. And George Richardson says she'll have to go soon, but she's not dead yet. He looked at her simply and nakedly. And I'm afraid. She saved our lives by coming back, but I'm afraid of her, and I'm afraid of why she came back. What do you mean, Stu? Mother Abigail would never harm. Mother Abigail does what God tells her to, he said harshly. That's the same God who murdered his own boy, or so I heard.
Yep.
Here we go.
I mean, just to specifically talk about that exact thing that Stu just said, like that's one of the weirdest unaddressed things in Christianity. Or I say unaddressed, it's something that they never talked about in my religious upbringing. The idea that we're supposed to condemn the Romans and condemn Judas and Pontius Pilate and so on and so on. But like, if God is omnipotent and all knowing, and Jesus like actually literally asked his Father for mercy on this one and didn't receive it, like who's really ultimately responsible here, right? It has to be the big guy. That's just something that never quite came up in Sunday school for some reason.
Yeah, because it's complicated, and I think like this is one of the greatest challenges of theology in a lot of ways, is trying to understand, in a world where there is an omnipotent, all-knowing, all-powerful God, and terrible things continue to happen. Why? And how does that work? And trying to understand it as a human living in this world, watching these terrible things happen. And I mean, there's lots of different explanations and understandings, and I think the one that I find the most appealing personally is just like, who the fuck are you to question the most powerful bit? Like, like you can't even comprehend, like, if this is the truth, that there is this all-powerful, all-knowing, everything happens according to the plan of God, then we don't understand 10% of what they understand, like, so just like, I it's not an answer, but it's like, who the fuck are you to question this? Like, like, well, I'm a person who has to live in this. Yeah, but fuck you. You're an ant. You're a fucking ant. You live a fraction of time, and then your soul comes and hangs out with me for all eternity. So don't stress about it.
Yeah. I could see my way to saying, like, the omnipotent, all-knowing creator of the universe probably has a different morality than humans have, or even like could possibly have. But see, I still think that I'm like entitled to be mad about that, though.
No, I'm not saying you're not. This is actually why I love stories by Christian creators that struggle with their faith. I love this shit. We talked about this before. Like, Martin Scorsese is a Catholic, raised Catholic, still practicing Catholic, I believe, and he makes movies about Christians and just struggling with understanding of this whole thing. Like The Last Temptation of Christ, great movie. Silence is literally a movie about faith and about maintaining faith amongst the worst possible things happening to you. And it's just a thing that I think, like, the mistake that I think is made is telling people of faith that you shouldn't struggle with that you shouldn't doubt, that you shouldn't wonder, that you shouldn't stand there and go like, hey, this is pretty fucked up, isn't it? And try to understand and work your way through that, because I think that's part of life, even life with faith. I think it is. And I think that's a lot of what King is wrestling with here.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right.
Oh boy, this is going to be a long, complicated conversation, isn't it? We got a lot more to say. So from here, though, we cut over to Larry, who, surprising no one at this point, has decided that this entire thing is his fault somehow. We say here, it says, same old Larry keeps his head while others all around him are losing theirs. The blast had thrown him across the driveway and into a flower bed, but he had not sustained a single scratch. Jagged shrapnel had rained down all around him, but nothing had touched him. Nick had died, Susan had died, and he had been unhurt. Yeah, same old Larry Underwood. I kind of love this decision that King has done with Larry here, right? Like, he already kind of finished one arc, and now he's struggling to finish his other, right? This is the guy that used to run away from every single problem, and now he's almost gone too far the other way, where he's taking responsibility for everything. Like, this goes back to what the judge said about him. He needs some self-righteousness. He needs to understand that there's some things you don't blame on yourself. There's nothing you could do, Larry. There's nothing more you could have done.
Yeah, you're right. I think this is an interesting development in his arc, because it actually kind of feels like we've seen him come too far in the direction of being a good person, which is, maybe a silly thing to say, but like, he started out somebody who we just, we're constantly making fun of, basically, for being so shitty, and now he's so he's beating himself up about things that are like you just said, beyond his real capability to have done anything. Like he did everything he could, right? He sort of did everything right, actually, and it's still he just kind of got outflanked. I do hope we keep moving his arc forward, and maybe he does find that self-righteousness that he's looking for.
Sure. Yeah. From here, we move on to 2 days later, the next committee meeting. The tone of this meeting is so different from all the other ones, and our characters kind of pick up on this difference immediately. There's more angry shouts from the audience, much more mob-like behavior. We see here that they have this real desire to not just catch Nadine and Harold, but, well, for lack of a better term, crucify them for what they've done.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. I mean, it makes you sad. Yeah, because there's an intrinsic tragedy to the idea that the Dark Man may have, in a very real sense, won a great victory here simply by poisoning the heart of this town.
Yeah.
He only killed a handful, but the rest of them are now tainted with darkness and vengeance. I think he'd be very happy with this outcome, actually.
Yeah, I think you're right. I love how Stu described this feeling he's getting, though. It says, a word that Nixon had used a lot suddenly floated into Stu's mind, and as he grasped at it, he suddenly understood the source of his despair and feeling of disorientation. The word was mandate. Their mandate had disappeared. It had gone up 2 nights ago in a flash and a roar. So suddenly they find themselves without a mandate from the people, and life is going to get more complicated.
It reminded me of this concept in ancient Chinese political philosophy called the mandate of heaven, wherein basically the emperor ruled because he had been given the mandate of heaven, which is the mandate of the natural order and the will of the universe, which you'd very well say is akin to the white.
Sure.
And then, every once in a while in Chinese history, everything would kind of go badly. There'd be a famine. A warlord would come along and sack the capital and crown himself emperor. And well, you know what? That's all well and good, because the mandate of heaven had just decided that the first guy didn't deserve the mandate anymore, and now this new guy, he gets the mandate of heaven because he won. And if he had, if he hadn't won, he wouldn't have gotten the mandate. It's a very delightful way of retroactively justifying power at all times, by just saying that the universe is changing its mind about who should be in charge.
Heaven's really cool like that, man. It really is.
Yeah, it's really convenient. It's like that guy said, isn't it interesting how the good guys have always won every war?
It's true. It's so true.
But yeah, so I thought it was a bit funny to me because like the committee has literally lost the mandate of heaven, in the sense that the white has basically said, no, this is not what you're supposed to be doing, right? So yeah.
So after informing people about the power coming back on soon and deciding to vote to replace the 2 lost committee members in the week following, and not right here in the meeting itself, they move on to the main topic at hand. They start talking about Mother Abigail and, of course, Randall Flagg. We learn that the mother is alive, barely, but the doctor confirms that she's basically going to die, that there's nothing on Earth he can do to keep her from dying, and so they need some other kind of intervention, if anything. We know, of course, that she will pass away in this week's episode, but as for Randall Flagg, this is something that the whole zone has been avoiding talking about for a while, and we see here that the fact that they finally get to do it is kind of therapeutic for everyone. Stu and the rest of them leave this committee meeting with hope for the first time since the explosion. It's almost as if God wanted this explosion to go off so that his people would start paying attention to the more important thing that they have to do and stop paying attention to all these other things that they didn't really have to do. It's almost as if that is exactly what God wanted to happen.
So basically, I have to admit, I am just like totally confused and of 2 minds about this, because it does seem to work out that way, doesn't it? It does seem to work out that the explosion actually does get, God, the white, whatever force, it gets the outcome that we kind of suspect Mother Abigail would have been happy with all along, which is they give up on their foolish aspirations to rebuild America and they continue on their quest. So,
yep.
Huh.
Yep. And to the things you said before about how, well, then why was the white like rushing and pulling out all the stops to save as many people from the explosion as possible? Well, because those are the people that it wanted to save. It didn't want to stop the explosion from going off. It didn't want to stop sacrificing some members, but we needed our 4. We needed at least 4 to go on this journey. And so we needed to make sure those guys are saved.
So I think you said this to me earlier in a separate conversation, and I find it so horrible that I just have to accept that it's true, which is, I think I said, like, I said something like, it seemed obvious that Nick was supposed to be the champion of the white. Nick was the figure, the figurehead, the heart, right? And I think you said something like, Nick had to be the sacrifice to push everybody else to the point where they were willing to go.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the white killed Nick on purpose to galvanize the rest of them, which is horrible.
Yeah, I mean, like look at it. Like, what is it that convinces Stu that he needs to go on the quest, right? What is it that makes him say yes? It's Mother Abigail turning to him and saying, "You have to lead them now, Stu. Nick is gone. It has to be you. You're next. You have to do it." Like, I mean, we will never know, right? But I legitimately do not believe that all four of these people say yes to what Mother Abigail tells them to do had this explosion not gone off and had Nick not died in it. I believe that Nick would have said yes to it because Nick's just that type of person. I think if Mother Abigail had come and Nick was still alive and she said, "Nick, I need you to go to Vegas. You got to do this," I believe that he would have gone. I just don't think all of the others would have.
Yeah.
I really don't. So you're forced to kind of conclude that, I think one of the things that Mother Abigail said earlier in the book is that everything is according to his plan, even the machinations of Randall Flagg, right?
Mm-hmm.
That this is all, everything is God's plan. We could go Ka. Everything is Ka. And the people that think they're not doing that, they're not going with the plan, they're not behaving this way, that they're trying to beat it, that's part of the plan too. That's part of the song. Mm-hmm. You're trying to change the song is just part of the song. Mm-hmm. That's how it works. And I think this is part of it. And I mean, the conclusion that you have to be to reach here at that is like, holy shit, that's awful. Yeah. Like, as a human being living in this world, that's monstrously cruel. That's the God you want me to worship, that would do that would use one person to teach another person a lesson, which by the way is the way people process death all the time in real life. Like when a young child dies of cancer, like this is God trying to teach us, to value, our lives and to do all these things. Like I hear this sentiment all the time whenever there's a tragedy, and I'm just like, that sucks. Mm-hmm. That sucks. That's awful. But like, if there is a higher power, if you believe in these things, and that's kind of what you're forced to believe. And I think what King is saying here is that, like, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, I don't mean it doesn't matter that people are dying or anything, but like this wrestling we do with, like, well, how can there be a like, God exists and God is cruel, and that's just a fact of existence. That God exists, he's here, the white, the power, Ka, it is here, it exists, and it is monstrously cruel, but it is also good.
Yeah. Or it's necessary that it be that cruel, because otherwise it would be discordia or something like that, right? Yeah. Like, I feel like that is ultimately the kind of the backstop justification in all of this stuff is like, God, this is intolerable. You kill all of my love. You got Roland with all of his loved ones dropping dead around him, and it's like, how can I tolerate this? It's like, well, the alternative is the end of everything, basically, and so that it's like, this is the best that we can do.
Yeah. I think if someone asked Stephen King, or at least the Stephen King and the stories that exist within this omniverse, why do bad things happen to good people? The answer is because they do. Mm-hmm. And like that, it's a fact of life, and all we can do is believe what we believe and put our faith in our belief and our hope in the things we believe, and stand when we need to stand. Mm-hmm. And we'll see how all that plays out. We're not done with the book yet, right? We still got a few hundred pages to go, but like, this is, as you said at the very beginning of the show, this is kind of a lot of the themes of the book are starting to reveal themselves here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, seems like it.
So the power goes on September 5th permanently, and of course the joy of that moment is a little bit lessened by this whole death and the explosion. I did like the beat where one person died on Power Day. The drunk man that was going around smashing windows just happens to be ripped apart by some shrapnel when a random building explodes. That was random and awful.
Random and awful, and also like sort of weirdly poetic, because it's like he was the one guy that was a pain in everybody's ass, and then he dies, and it's,
guess we don't have to worry about him anymore.
Yeah, right. It's sort of it almost feels like a sort of fumbling attempt at some kind of justice or something. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So later that night, Stu is awakened suddenly. Mother Abigail is awake and has summoned the remainder of the zone committee to talk to her, and they dutifully go. As they get in with Mother Abigail, Larry is there, and he talks to Franny a little bit, and he says, "I'm sorry like hell we have to get you out," he said. "I was in with her, dozing off and on. We've been keeping watch, you understand?" "Yes, I understand," Franny said. For some reason, the phrase keeping watch made her think of her mother's parlor, and in kinder, more forgiving light than she'd ever thought of it before. What was your take on this? This is kind of returning to the original Franny moment in the book.
Yeah, I admit I have some trouble seeing what King is gesturing at here. The best I can do is that her mother's parlor is a sort of attempt at preserving something, perhaps her mother's attempt at preserving her vision of goodness or good times, better times. And Franny didn't get it at the time, certainly.
Yeah.
But maybe now at least she can relate to the impulse to do so.
Yeah. I like that. I think, Franny had a lot of anger and hatred towards her mother. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how that has changed now that she's like fully kind of absorbing what it is to be a mother. I mean, I know she hasn't had the child yet, but like her baby has been a constant anxiety for her, as it is when you are pregnant and or a parent. And maybe like not that her mom should be forgiven for all the terrible things that she's done, but like, she's imagining losing the baby, imagining what that would feel like, and knows that her mother did lose one of her children. And
right.
And this idea of having this place to preserve something, as you said, to this place of calm and order and rules. I like that. I don't know exactly why. I agree with you that I don't get exactly why them sitting up waiting to make sure Mother Abigail is okay connects to her in that kind of way. I don't quite see the connection if our interpretation is a correct one, but I like what you said.
Yeah, I don't have anything better than that, and I don't particularly love what I said either, but yeah, it's the best I can do.
Mm-hmm. They go in to see Mother Abigail, who is wasted away to almost nothing. We haven't actually talked about what she looks like, but the description here, Matt, is wow. There was nothing left on her, but what is that?
Pemmican tough. Pemmican. What is pemmican? I don't know what it. Let's.
I was gonna cut this out, but now I'm gonna leave this in.
It's a mixture of tallow, dried meat, and sometimes dried berries. I've heard of pemmican. Yeah, it's like a trail mix food. It's a.
Have you really heard of this before?
Well, now that I see it, I realize that I have. Yeah, it's.
Do you think Stephen King knew what pemmican was, or
for sure?
I need an adjective.
You know how I know? Because if you go to Boulder and you walk in any store, you will see pemmican. Because it's one of these hiking foods.
Oh, it's got like granola people.
60,000 calories per bar. Because it's like, again, tallow, dried meat, and berries, basically.
Wow. Okay.
I'm exaggerating on the calories, but it's very calorie dense.
All right. There was nothing left of her but a pemmican tough membrane of skin and tendon binding her bones. There was not even the smell of putrescence and oncoming death in the room. Instead, there was a dry attic smell. No, a parlor smell. Half the length of the IV needle hung out of her flesh simply because there was nowhere else for it to go. Yet the eyes had not changed. They were warm and kind and human. That was a relief, but Fran still felt a kind of terror, not strictly fear, but perhaps something more sanctified. Awe. Was it awe? An impending feeling, not doom, but as though some dreadful responsibility was poised above their heads like a stone. I love that so much. I think this is perfectly measures like the kind of like the idea of God as warmth and kindness, like love and warmth and kindness. I mean, these are the things that I love so much about the way the Christian God is described sometime. Like this, the idea of grace and the idea of love and warmth and unquestioning, unwavering, like it's just so wonderful. But also with that comes a kind of terrifying awe at a power that is beyond anything that you could possibly imagine, and can exert its will on you in a way that it is so horrifying that you are just completely powerless against it. It is and can be both of these things at the same time.
Yeah. I love so I know we've kind of been talking about the idea of theodicy this whole conversation, which is the name of the idea of how can there be omnipotent, omni-good God in a world where evil exists. It's the question of theodicy. I think I'm saying that right. Who knows? Nobody knows. And I think this moment to me, we're reminding ourselves that God is still goodness and love, in addition to all this other stuff we've been talking about. Like, God does make you suffer, but he loves you, and that can feel like a horrible contradiction. But like, actually, if you're a parent for like 5 minutes, you realize the inevitability of the conflict of those two things. Because if I did everything if I did everything at every moment to protect and sort of serve my children's wants and protect them from every scrape, they would be coddled, and they would not live up to their potential. I would be weakening them. I would not be raising them to be strong, well-rounded humans. And that's, and it's not cruelty when I say, like, get your own orange juice, sweetie. It's just me, sort of showing them that the world is not a place where everything just happens for you automatically. You have to work sometimes. And I feel like that's the closest that I can really get to understanding, like bad things happen to people, because if no bad things ever happened, then the very nature of humanity would sort of be stifled. Yeah. I bring that up here because this is a moment that reminds us of like the loving nature of God as shown through Abigail.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the entire concept of this book is that 99% of the population has to be wiped out so that the remaining 0.6% can have their final stand between good and evil. Like if this is the final stand for the fate of humanity, or the fate of everything good versus everything evil, in order to do that, well, we gotta pare the sides back a little bit here. We gotta cull the two sides a little bit here to make this a much more immediate. I mean, that is the truth of the book, right? And that is terrible and cruel and awful. I think the parent-child paradigm is really effective here, because like the reason why you have to do that with your kids is because they don't know any better, and you know better than them. You are a more fully formed, fully functioning person. They have not learned these things yet, and you know better than them. And so you could argue that that's God saying, you feel like what I'm doing right here is the worst possible thing I could do, but you don't know any better. I do. And so I'm telling you, do this. and this is going to happen, and you're going to do this, and if you do that, and if you believe, it'll all work out in the end. I promise you. And it doesn't feel like it's going to, but I know more than you, so just listen to me. And that's kind of what it is,
right? Or even like you may die, but in a general sense, it's all going to work out in the end.
But that is a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that's from Shrek, by the way. It's not a.
I know. Okay, I knew that.
Just making sure.
It's
I didn't want to take credit for something. So Franny is totally correct in all her feeling here. Mother Abigail makes it painfully clear. She says, God didn't bring you folks together to make a committee or a community. She says, he brought you here only to send you further on a quest. He means for you to try and destroy this dark prince, this man of far leagues. So that's when we learn the four of them, Stu, Larry, Ralph, and Glenn, no Franny, are to go west to Vegas and confront Randall Flagg.
Gotta admit, I'm surprised that Glenn and Ralph make the cut, but Franny does not.
Yeah, you can't even say it's because her foot's broken, because that gets magically healed in this moment. So
I think intentionally so, to make it even more stark, the fact that she isn't sent, right?
Yeah.
So
I think probably mostly due with the fact that she's pregnant. I don't know if I want to read like sexism into this. I think it, God is cruel, but also you're the literal hope of humanity. That baby is in your belly right now, so maybe you just hang back and chill. I don't know.
It also seems like, the white seems to sort of require this sort of faith from its servants.
Sure.
And she does not seem to have that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think she would have ever said yes, even if offered, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone reacts to this mission with like, are you fucking kidding me? That's crazy. We're all gonna die. But nobody does it as violently and angry as Franny, who like lashes out at Mother Abigail, lashes out at God, lashes out at everything. And yeah, she's the one that I think has the most physical reaction to this, for sure.
Yeah.
And Abigail says nothing to that, but she just calls her a little girl. Again, going back to this parent-child thing you were talking about a little bit earlier, just calls her little girl, grabs her hand, and Franny is thusly cured of her sprained back and her broken foot, and we're told, "Behold the power of God." I love the moment when Franny says, "Is he bribing me?" And she's like, "God doesn't bribe people. He just does what he wants, and then you can decide what to do with that." Right. It's just really, really wonderful, as compared to Randall Flagg, who is constantly bribing people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, seducing them, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Mother Abigail lays out basically the entire rest of the book for us. You are to go west, Mother Abigail whispered. You are to take no food, no water. You are to go this very day, and in the clothes you stand up in. You are to go on foot. I am in the way of knowing that one of you will not reach your destination, but I don't know which will be the one to fall. I am in the way of knowing that the rest will be taken before this man Flagg, who is not a man at all, but a supernatural being. I don't know if it's God's will for you to defeat him. I don't know if it's God's will for you to ever see Boulder again. These things are not for me to see. But he is on Las Vegas, and you must go there, and it is there you will make your stand. You will go, and you will not falter, because you have the everlasting arm of the Lord God of hosts to lean on. Yes, with God's help, you will stand. I mean, it's hard not to get like inspired by something like that, right? It's like just the confidence and the clarity of it. It's like, you're going to do this and you're going to do this, and I don't know if it's going to work out, but I believe it will, and so you must as well. You will stand. You will stand and make your stand, and they said the title, so it's good.
They said the title. Yeah. If you were in this position, I can imagine being like, I'm just curious to see what'll happen to me. Mm-hmm. Like maybe I get crucified, but at least that kind of answers some questions about the nature of the cosmos.
Sure. Yeah, I love that she can't give them anything. She can't give them any certainty, nothing. That she's only given the orders. She's not given any of the results. All that they can be, and that's the distillation of faith, right? Like, that's what faith is like, I'm going to tell you what to do. Like, God says, do this, do this, do this. It's in the Bible. Do it. And if you do that, it's all going to work out. I promise you. And all you can do, you will never get any reassurance on that, right? Like, you can't. That's not the way it works. All you can do is believe and go. That's all you can do. And so, they have a choice, but this is what God wants, is what we're told. And so they all agree to go. They eventually get to a place where all of them agree to go. I love the moment where Glenn doesn't agree to go until Abigail's mouth opens and Glenn's exact words play back to him. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, no, that's I love that moment too. It's a great moment. So it's a great callback. It's genius. I really like that.
It is really. And then we have this moment, right as Mother Abigail dies, our characters are sitting there, and it says, "Dawn touched the edge of the world." I just love that so much.
Yeah. Yep. And we had the sunset image earlier, right? So definitely playing with that in this part of the story.
It is indeed. So, I mean, I guess where are you at right now as far as like the concepts of faith and belief, and God says, go do this. So you four are going to go do it, and you have to go, and you can't bring any food, can't bring any water. Like, this needs to be a pure test of your faith. Are you contented with the direction the book's going there? Because there were moments and times throughout the book where you were kind of wondering, and I kind of just allowed this to happen, where you're like, maybe the book is trying to say that this kind of blind faith is not a good thing. And it seems like what we're doing right now is saying, no, it actually is. And this is what they need to do. So where are you at mentally?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of it being a good thing is sort of depends on where you're standing, you could say, or
sure.
So like, I don't know if this is really an answer to your question, but it's like Mother Abigail did everything right. She was like a perfect servant of God. She made like one little mistake, right? Like her attention wavered for a second, but other than that, she's like this perfect avatar. And what did she get? Well, she had to go wandering and eating berries and tree bark and twigs, and then died, having lost her whole family and everything she cares about. So it's like, okay, but it's maybe good in some sense beyond her, like some greater sense that she'll never even see or understand, and she's okay with that because she trusts. But the funny thing is, we also have to trust, right? We don't know. And I guess that's part of faith, is having faith that like all of these sacrifices are for something, which it is the kind of faith that I have an extremely hard time with, where I'm just like, prove it. Like, show me some evidence, any kind of evidence that this is actually right. Because like, what distinguishes Mother Abigail from a charlatan who simply thinks that they're hearing God's voice is, what are the consequences going to be? And she can't possibly know the consequences, and neither do we. So that's, I guess, I can't answer your question like clearly, but that's about where I am now. Is just to say, I think that's part of faith, is never really having a firm answer to that question.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, but I mean, like, it's so funny because we create this specific to God and but like, isn't that true for how you live your life anyway? That like, what do you do in your life? You have a system of morality, either a mixture of like whatever ingrained morality human beings have in them, like if you want to say it's soul, what I don't know, and also the things that you're taught growing up and throughout your life, and you make choices based on that system, and you hope that you're making the right choices, and you hope that things will work out in some larger sense in the end, but you don't actually know. No one actually ever knows. We don't know how this whole thing's going to turn out. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's the reaction to this episode is going to be. Maybe we're going to piss a bunch of people off. I don't know. You just like, that's just life. That's what you do. And I mean, we attach this greater meaning and this with this greater power to it, as for many different reasons. But that's what we're all hoping. We're all hoping that at the end of the day, we make good choices, and those choices work out in one way or another, and they often don't. And even the idea that even if the choice you made is the right one, but still ends up in you dying horribly thousands of miles away from your home, emaciated, with your body slowly eating itself at 108 years old. Like, you have to believe that the good that you put out in the universe is going to have some effect, right? Like, that's as much faith to me as I believe in God and Jesus Christ and whatever. Like, that is, you're having faith in existence.
Mm-hmm. Having faith that God is ultimately has the good in mind, whatever the good is, and you may not even grasp what that is fully.
That it's going to be okay, and that your contribution matters, and like in whatever way it does matter. And I don't know, I just like that. That's the type of thing I can get behind. That like we just got to live our lives and hope that we're doing good, that striving to do good, however we define that, and that it's going to make a difference in one way or another.
I really like that. You've actually given me a lot to chew on there, because I never quite, I don't know, made that exact connection of like, well, you kind of have, you don't exempt yourself from this burden of faith just by not having a specific religious faith. you still have to like believe in something, right? Or no, that's really interesting. I like that a lot.
All right. So we also get, I had to talk about this because I see in the notes you've written exactly what I wanted you to write. So we have Franny and Stu going out for a picnic the hours before it's time for Stu to leave, and Franny is of course angry and heartbroken and kind of resolved that this is happening no matter what. I love her here. I love the complexity of her here. It's so wonderful.
Yeah. She's very bitter, right? She's behaving differently than we've seen her, and it's because she just feels like this is so unfair.
Yeah.
Which I think, again, this is why she wouldn't really fit in on the quest, because we see from her bitter reaction that her faith is extremely lacking. She's a good person and she's on the good guy team, but she doesn't have this sort of faithfulness that the white really requires.
Sure. So they're kind of talking back and forth, and we get to this quote. When it came to the Bible, I knew all the questions. Job was a bet between God and the devil. The devil said, sure, he worships you. He's got it soft, but if you piss in his face long enough, he'll renounce you. So God took the wager, and God won. She smiled dully. God always wins. God is a Boston Celtics fan, I bet. Maybe it is a bet, Stu said, but it's their lives, those folks down there, and the guy inside you. What did she call him? The chap? The chap. Susanna? Mia?
Susanna?
What? I had to put that in for you, but I like this idea. Like, maybe it is a bet, but it's their lives, those folks down there. And Stu's like, yeah, maybe this whole thing is a bet. Maybe this whole thing is God and the devil making a wager about what people will do when put with their backs to the wall. But I think Stu's calculation here is the bet is for the lives of those people. If I can do something, if my actions can save all those people down there, and most importantly, that little guy inside you, then that's a bet. I'll roll the dice. I'll do it. I'll go to Vegas. I'll play the slots. Let's do it.
Love it. Yep. That's great.
So before they go, Franny makes Stu swear to return. On the blood of Nick, they wager. They find some blood at the destroyed house and decide that it's Nick, even though it probably isn't. But she makes Stu swear on Nick's blood to return. So pretty big moment, I think, right?
Yep. I mean, he has to return now.
Yeah, he swore on Nick. Yeah. On Jesus.
On
the blood of Christ.
The blood of Christ. Yep. It's gotta find that grail now, I guess.
All right, so we move on to our final chapter. We are running way late, so thankfully a very short chapter, Matt. This is basically just a one-pager. I kind of love this. We'll talk about the events of the chapter in a sec, but we mentioned a while ago that as we moved into book 2, the structure of this book kind of changed. We went from, in a week, covering 8 to 10 chapters that were really short in a lot of ways, to covering a maximum of 3. And now here at the end of section 2, right before we move on to the final book and the final part of the book as a whole, we have one single page chapter, as if gesturing to the reader that this time of the book, this time in committees, this time discussing, this time trying to rebuild community, this time of very, very long chapters is coming to an end, and we're returning to things as they were before. We're leaving Boulder and returning to this story as it was before we got here.
Yeah, I like that. So that's I didn't think of that, but I like that a lot.
I'm just making this up, by the way. I don't think this was intentional, but I think it just works this way.
Yeah, it feels right. You know what you're saying? It feels right. I mean yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I didn't even notice this chapter was so short, which is a weird, maybe dumb thing to say, but like it felt so weighty and like magnificent that I didn't. If you had asked me how long was chapter 60, I would have been like, I mean, not as long as the other chapters, but I wouldn't have said like, 2 pages or 1 page.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because like the constant question I always have when looking at these things is like, why did you choose to make this a new chapter where you could have easily made it just another section? Like, especially in this part of the book where our point of view is jumping around constantly, and we have multiple section breaks throughout each chapter where we jump to a new time, a new area, a new point of view character. We're just jumping around constantly. And then you get to something like this, and we've taken the time to break to a new chapter, and it's a really short one. And so you're wondering, like, couldn't you just stacked that on the end of chapter 59? And the answer is, yeah, I could have, but I wanted this to stand out on its own. I wanted this to feel distinct and of its own. And so, one way to do that is to call it a new chapter. And that's exactly what King did here.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, like I said, this is just a one pager. The beginning is Franny and Lucy kind of watching their men leave them behind, and then just going to sit down and drink some tea and ponder and wait, which they will be doing for quite a while. Just this waiting to find out what happened to them. And then we cut over to the men who are leaving Boulder behind and going out into the wilderness, not knowing their fate. And I love, as you said, there's a lot of weight to this chapter. And I love the writing here. Ahead of them was darkness and death. Behind them was a little warmth, a little love. They went on, leaving Boulder behind them. By 9 that night, they were camping in Golden, half a mile from where Route 6 begins its twisting, turning course along Clear Creek and into the stone heart of the Rockies. None of them slept well that first night. Already they felt far from home and under the shadow of death. And that's the end. That's the end of book 2.
It's great. I love it.
Yeah. I didn't prep you for this. It's not in the script, but I wanted to ask you. We're told 1 will fall, 3 will make it. Any guesses on who?
I mean, my confidence is shot in this moment because I did such a bad job, but I feel like Larry and Stu are the ones with kind of the most arc left in them.
Sure.
And also they're the 2 point of view characters, and so I would expect either Glenn or Ralph. And I guess I'm gonna just guess Ralph. It would be really interesting if Stu like died on the way there, because that's like the last thing that I would expect to happen. But it could happen. Yeah. Then I think Glenn or Ralph, honestly.
Okay. All right. Well, we will find out one way or another in the next 3 weeks, because that is all that we have left of this book, Matt. We have 3 more weeks. Next week, we're going to be beginning book 3 with chapters 61 through 66. And then we've got 2 more sections after that. And then the book's done.
Wow. What an epic journey.
I know. It's all come down to this. We have 222 pages to go, AKA the length of a normal book. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it here.
Awesome.
All right. All right. Before we go for the week, we do have discussion question and answers to read. We didn't get that many this week, so I think we're going to have time even in this already very long episode. But Matt, what was the discussion question from last week's episode?
What fictional character do you think could use a bit more self-righteousness, and why? So first we had from Baby Can You Dig Your Sam. The students in the Dead Poet Society. You wish Neil had more self-righteousness that would have led him away from suicide. And we see Ethan Hawke's character finally become a man of conviction when he jumps on top of his desk and shouts, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." Eowyn doubts herself and her gender in Lord of the Rings and finds herself in cahoots with Merry, who also doubts himself because of his size. But they both have enough self-righteousness to don armor and fight alongside the men. And the two of them take down the Witch King Vengamar because they're total badasses. Lastly, Neville Longbottom. He also developed a healthy sense of righteousness in the final book, but before then he was plagued with lots of self-doubt. Yeah, these are three examples of characters who ultimately did find that self-righteousness, but the whole story, you're sort of rooting for them to get there. I like that.
I love this because this is 100% true, and I don't think at any point in any of these characters' arcs did anyone ever refer to this as finding self-righteousness. Mm-hmm. Because again, it's a word that has so much negative connotation that using it to describe any of these characters' arcs would be met with resistance. But it's true.
Yeah.
Like 100%. This is why I love this so much. It's like he uses this phrase and turns its meaning to the point where it becomes self-evidently true that it's a good thing that these characters got this. But,
it's so funny.
Yeah. Hobo Demon says Eve, the protagonist for Birdie Wing, is badly in need of some self-righteousness, and it's good that her arc seems to be finding some. I'm just a girl who hits balls with a stick for money, she says, like a poser dominatrix. But the viewing audience is like, shut up with that. We all know you're only doing the dirty deeds with the golf mafia to help finance your friend's gray market combination bar / orphanage for precocious child refugees. What the fuck? What the fuck?
Sounds fun.
What is this? That was a whole bunch of shit.
That was a lot of words in an order.
Oh, it's a golf anime?
Based on our history with sports animes, Scott.
I did like a sports anime. Shocker.
We'd probably like this one.
I liked ping pong.
I actually would bet that you would actually like a variety of sports animes because you like sports stories.
I love sports stories, yeah.
All right, Perry Jane says... you should have been the one to read this, Scott. I'm going to say Tara from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Tara, am I saying that right, Scott? Tara?
No, but it's okay.
Tara?
Yeah.
Tara. Tara is... Wait, really?
Uh-huh.
Tara is righteous. Along with Buffy's mom, she's the moral center of the show, and she has a very clear-eyed understanding of what's right and what's wrong. But her lack of self-righteousness often means that she's not as willing to throw down publicly when someone really goes off the rails. She does show it occasionally, especially with Dawn, and she grows more courageous as her bonds with the group strengthen and solidify. But I think the Scooby Gang would have benefited from a little more fire and brimstone, Tara. This whole convo reminds me of a hip shot theory I have about successful politicians. I call it SPA. All successful politicians have a balance between desire to serve, willingness to use power, and arrogance to believe they're the best person for the job. In this context, desire to serve indicates that the person has a strong understanding of what they believe is right, is the right kind of government, and they're competent enough to make that vision happen. A willingness to use power is crucial to leadership, and arrogance isn't always bad. If you can't convince other people you're the best for the job, they're not going to follow you. Self-righteousness is a kind of combination of arrogance and service. I'm right, and I'm going to tell you so, and insist that you agree with me. I've had, I'm not going to say I've had the same thought, but I've had a similar thought about like successful corporate leaders, where they often get called like selfish assholes, and it's like, well, if they weren't, you never would have heard their name, and you never would have heard about their company, and that's sort of a tragic fact about the world, actually. But yeah. There it is.
I like this a lot too, because I just remember having conversations with my parents for whatever reason about like athletes, and like my mom like didn't like really successful, popular, very good at the sport athletes because they just seemed so arrogant. And I would always be like, yeah, but like, don't you have to be like to be the best player on the court? Don't you have to like fully believe that when the game's on the line, you're the one to take the shot? And that might come off as arrogant, but
yeah,
just also kind of true,
right?
Like that like, because the best player in the world will always be the one that thinks that they're the one that needs to take the shot, the one that knows that they're the one that needs to take the shot.
Or you have to be able to think like, I'm going to go take the ball from Michael Jordan, and then run it down the court and dunk. And like that's an insane thought, but like that's how arrogant you have to be.
Yeah. I think it's true in sports. I think it is true. I think that's a great pull. It's true in politics. And Matt, the reason why I like you reading the Buffy the Vampire Slayer answers is because I can close my eyes and just pretend that we're doing a Buffy podcast when I hear you talk about it, and so it makes me happy.
Well, I'm glad that I'm able to make you happy in this small way.
That's some really great, insightful thoughts about Tara, Matt. I really appreciate that. Next, we have Complicated 9519, who says, what character got the self-righteousness they needed? I was going to give Megamind as an answer, but after writing a whole paragraph, I decided to go with Nesta from A Court of Thorns and Roses. She is the older sister to the main character of the series and is actually the main protagonist of the most recent book. This woman isn't evil, but has a nasty attitude, and after a major war plays out, she has turned She's turned from human to fairy and watches as her father dies right in front of her. She pretty much loses the will to go on and care for others. Her sister now is the High Lady of the Night Court, and other people of her inner circle decide she's set to live on top of this insanely tall tower, train in sword fighting, and work in the library connected with the tower to help her reform herself and better herself. It takes a while, and Nesta is very opposed to this, but after making friends and accepting her fate, she learns to become a better person. It's all trial and error, and definitely a long journey of new self-discovery, but she does make up with everyone she's mean to. It goes on from there, but I think we get it. I don't know this story at all, but I think, the more we talk about this, the more I think we realize that getting self-righteousness is just actually a very common character arc. Again, we just don't frame it that way typically.
Yeah, no, but it's like, now that I've seen the word used that way, I can't help but think that it's a great way of using that word, and I'm gonna start doing it all the time.
Totally, I agree.
Don Zest says, I struggled to think of a character who needed self-righteousness and never had the opportunity to take action. Most heroes doubt themselves, then come through at the right moment, whereas most villains have too much self-righteousness. A very satisfying strike of self-righteousness occurred when George McFly tells Biff to leave Lorraine alone at the end of Back to the Future. He is hesitant and weak for the whole movie, but when he realizes he was the one who could help her, the only one who could help her, he made his stand. Of course, when he eventually slugs Biff, the deal is sealed. God, that's one of my literal favorite moments in movies.
So good. It's so good. It's so brilliantly constructed because it starts off with him thinking that it's Marty, right? Like he goes to the car ready for Marty to be there because that was the plan. And then he sees that it's Biff and he has this moment of, oh shit, oh fuck. But then the movie allows him to, seeing the truth of it, make the same choice again, where he goes, no, Biff, you leave her alone.
Yeah.
It's just perfect. It's just perfect. That's such, Back to the Future is a perfect movie.
Right. And then of course, by taking the right action, that is what sets the future back on track, right? Which is, but better because he did it. He did it right this time, right? Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Last but not least, we have Just Stand 8460 who says, Chief Brody from Jaws. The film has some great characters. The one who makes it for me is Brody. This guy is just trying to keep the island safe, and he holds the authority to do the right thing to keep his citizens alive, but he's battling the mayor and the townsfolk to get through this horror. With the help of Hooper and Quint, second and third place for favorite personalities in the film, he finally gets the job done. But I can't help but think that some people wouldn't have had to die if Hooper had just had a little self-righteousness from the start.
Yeah, that's funny. Agree. No, this is a great answer. Yeah, I love it.
I agree. That's great.
Awesome.
All right, so that is it. Thank you so much for sending those answers in. I think this was really fun. None of the answers we got were things that I was thinking about when we asked the question, but I don't care. I love them all.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
All right, Matt, what is next week's discussion question?
What is the best / most effective / favorite / whatever explosion in fiction?
Stuff blows up in stories a lot, like whether they be movies or books, or things blow up a lot, and we want to talk about what blowing up do you like the most?
Yeah,
why?
You can try to be clever and thematic and relate it to an explosion that changes the course of the plot, like The Stand, or whatever. is what I say.
Yeah, there's no rules here.
No, there's not.
It's the Kingslingers Free Zone.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not you're the committee members.
Yeah, we just got the electricity on. And it blew up a gas station.
Wait, I'll be right. I gotta go put something in the closet real quick. All right, folks. That is it for us this week on Kingslingers. As we said, next week we will begin the third and final book of The Stand. We're going to be reading and discussing chapters 61 through 66. Like I said, Matt, we're back to more chapters now. We've moved on from that long chapter episode of the novel, and we are now into shorter chapters again.
Very nice. Remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod.com. No. kingslingerspod@gmail.com.
No.
Or over on Twitter at kingslingerspod, or over on the subreddit at r/doofmedia.
Can I just say I appreciate how you handled that situation? Just no.
Let
me redo that.
Uh-huh.
If you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we strongly recommend you do so to make sure you never miss a single solitary minute of this just incredible content, because I have a healthy amount of self-righteousness. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And if you like any of our shows and you want to support us, then please consider donating to patreon.com/doofmedia.
Matt, would you say it is money well spent?
I would firmly and with great confidence state that.
Wow, you are so self-righteous.
Thank you.
Of course, if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is and always will be absolutely okay. There are tons of ways to help us out. Just listening helps us. That helps us a whole bunch. Keep doing that. And also, please keep sharing it with your friends and family. And also, please keep sending us those ratings and reviews. This week's Spotlight review comes from Dark Tower fan, who gives us 5 stars and says, "Very good so far. I've been a Dark Tower fan for a long time, so between the comics and movie adaptation, I'm always ready for something not so great to be associated with the books. I was worried that would be the case with this pod, but so far it has been great. Really enjoying what I have heard so far. Thanks for making it." Well, thank you, Dark Tower fan. I, too, am a Dark Tower fan.
Yeah, I'm happy that we're exceeding the low standards set by the Dark Tower spinoff materials.
That is pretty fortunate that we can just clear that hurdle pretty easily.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks again, and thank you everyone who has sent those reviews, and we really do appreciate them. They mean the world to us. And I've got a backlog of emails I need to respond to. Some people sent us some very nice emails over the past couple weeks, and I have not responded to them. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh, he just ignored my very nice email," I haven't. I will respond. Thank you so much for sending them in. We do appreciate them, even if I am bad at email.
Yeah. Well, it's all Scott's fault.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Hey, Matt, will you go check the closet real quick? I put something in there for you.
Yeah, let me just. What's this?
All right, folks. We will see you right back here next week for another episode of Kingslingers. Until then, long days and pleasant nights.
May you have twice the number.